Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about what if Jiraiya claimed to be a level 8 seal master and was shocked that Naruto was a higher level seal master. Part 1. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. There were a lot of things medical chakra could do, from healing minor scabs to mending entire skeletal systems, going even further to say that it could heal entire limbs back to functionality. It was even widely rumored that if a medic was to go deeper into his or her profession, then he or she would be able to regenerate from fatal wounds. Most believed that was what the crystal on the legendary slug Sannin, Tsunade Senju, symbolized, but thankfully there wasn't any reason for the woman to demonstrate what it was for. True, medical ninjutsu was a great branch of ninjutsu which all ninjas had great respect for. There were some things that it couldn't do, like raising the dead, permanently curing hereditary brain tumors, or even healing fatal spine injuries. Those unfortunate that medical ninjutsu couldn't aid in any way were deeply compensated in other ways if they were ninjas and heavily insured if they were civilians. Naruto never enjoyed any of these medical privileges. His medical problems started from birth, 12 years ago when the Kyuubi had been freed and not too long before it was to be resealed, but this time into the Yondame's only son, just as Kushina and Minato had used their bodies to prevent the Kyuubi's violent claw from reaching their precious child. The lethal nail had come halfway through and scratched Naruto's right thigh, leaking a small portion of its vile chakra into the infant's growing chakra system. Popular polls and basic knowledge for the more adept ninjas stated that demon chakra, yokai, no matter how small, was poisonous. It was a tainted, fractured version of the human chakra system that had come to be through less known means. Naruto was in a world of pain and he was too young to understand what pain was. It was after this time that Kyuubi had been sealed inside him with a semi-irreversible seal matrix. Instead of the standard Uzumaki sealing method, the red-haired woman used to keep the chakra monster in her, as well as the Jinchuriki before her, Uzumaki Mido. The tainted chakra had taken over the poor child's right leg, and just as the Kyuubi could take its chakra back, it was too late. Naruto's whole right leg was now useless. It was something the Kyuubi would both regret and be thankful it had done when the blonde would ask him in the future. Regret because it was the reason Naruto would never be a shinobi again, and be thankful because the boy found something to make him far better than any shinobi. The bad leg, outwardly, looked as healthy as its other half, albeit paler and a little gaunt, but inwardly it was useless and partly lifeless. Naruto had been confined to a wheelchair since the day he could remember, and he had been a sitting duck since the day he could talk. The villagers, not knowing whose son he was, capitalized on the fact he couldn't run by beating him. All the child could do was beg for mercy, but none was given. On his 4th birthday, he was kicked out of the orphanage, having to crawl to a shelter and last a month before the old Hokage would rescue him. The only friend he had was the voice in his head proclaiming himself as the nine-tailed fox, the most powerful of all the tailed beasts. He had been introduced to the Kyuubi, involuntarily, when he was forced to eat moldy bread and drink cold milk. It was the Kyuubi that kept bolstering him to not give up. If the Kyuubi hadn't been there, then Naruto would have gladly submitted to the world. They say everyone globally recognized has an origin story. Naruto's origin story was that he opened a book. Well, it wasn't exactly a book, more of a single page in a beat-up paperback. He had just celebrated his 5th birthday by himself. The Hokage had recently been too busy to visit him, dog mask wearing Anbu had stopped coming as well, and even the cat that had a curious red ribbon on her ear had stopped visiting. The only person who stayed, since they didn't have any option, was the Kyuubi. After celebrating another lonely birthday, the child was about to go to bed until a thin book was thrown at him through the window by a drunk villager who just happened to throw the first thing he saw, disregarding all the healthy-sized stones around in favor of an old, abused paperback book. He tentatively picked it up, not having the energy to yell at the man, and opened the book. It was like the heavens had sent him an apology for how messed up his life was. The book contained only a picture and a page-long paragraph. He was at least grateful that the 3rd Hokage had taught him how to read and write before he stopped coming. Apparently, the picture wasn't a picture at all, it was a seal. He took his time marveling over how neat and intricate it looked, tracing his fingers over the drawing. His eyes then trailed to the writing. It was in neat cursive, and from what he read the picture was a basic fuinjutsu for storage. His voice murmured slowly as his fingers traced where he was reading. After reading he blinked slowly and read over it again. Something in his mind clicked. Kyu. What do you think? The living natural disaster was also reading the writing. He looked at the Shinigami seal, knowing that he would never be able to break out, and shrugged. From what I remember, fuinjutsu is a very underappreciated branch of jutsu. The possibilities are endless. I'm certain that with enough dedication, I'll be able to walk. Naruto finished. He looked back at the seal and relaxed his hands when he saw they were gripping the delicate book harshly. I don't know Kyu. This looks hard. He again trailed his fingers on the seal. Kyuubi allowed the boy to speak. This fuin something doesn't seem like much. But you did say it was underappreciated and that the possibilities are endless. The boy hummed cutely and scratched his chin. You know what? I'll see what I can do, if it's too hard I'll stop. The Kyuubi rolled his eyes and settled in for the night, while Naruto struggled up to the windowsill directly next to his bed and waved his arms frantically. A mantis mask-wearing Anbu operative dropped down from the roof and crouched on his desk. The unknown question asked, "Please, Mr. Anbu, can you get me more stuff on this, please?" The man scoffed and was about to jump away, but Naruto wasn't having any of that. He latched onto his leg with both arms and held on. "Please," he tried doing what he saw most orphans do to collect more food. Pout and widen his eyes. Naruto underestimated the power his kicked puppy look had on people. The man sighed and quietly flicked Naruto's arms away. He then leapt out the window and came back a minute later with an arm-sized scroll. "Beginner's level, kid, when it's done, let me know." Naruto was only half hearing what the man had droned. He had snatched the scroll and was pouring through it furiously, giddy and hyperactive in a way the ninja had never seen from the boy. Mantis shrugged and dropped the empty scroll, brush and ink on the bed. He briefly studied the boy, and when he was sure Naruto wouldn't notice he dropped another empty scroll, as a spare, and left. Naruto wasn't aware, not in the least. He was salivating over the beginner's scroll for Fuinjutsu users. His mind was a whirlwind of ideas and possibilities from what the unknown author of the scroll wrote seal masters could do with seals. It said Fuinjutsu could seal away entire buildings and even create a solid protective barrier when needed. He filled in the blanks of what the person didn't want to write, like it could seal away tailed beasts and, if possible, alter reality. Not too much but to the user's favor. If Fuinjutsu could do this, then there was still hope for him to be a ninja. If he could create a seal fast enough before the academy started admitting his age group, then he could be a ninja. Realistically speaking, it was impossible. One of the signature jutsu the fourth Hokage used, as outlined by the scroll, took him years to make and even longer to fully master, so he instinctively prepared himself for disappointment. There was one thing he wasn't aware of, it was to never count out in Uzumaki, especially when it came to Fuinjutsu. Sleep left him that night and the subsequent nights and the subsequent months of studying the enthralling scroll. The boy was so dedicated to mastering the beginner's scroll that he had set aside an hour, from 3 AM to 4 AM, to get some shut-eye. It was just for necessity, as much as he wanted to spend every waking second poring over Fuinjutsu scrolls, practicing his strokes, and memorizing patterns. He preferred his body to shut down somewhere that wouldn't scatter his research. It was after 3 months that he had finally made a successful storage scroll. Naruto couldn't recall the happiest he had ever been after seeing the stick being sealed into the scroll and unsealed. He didn't need to even ask the Mantis Anbu to give him another scroll. He found another level scroll, bigger and heavier than the last one, on his bed. Little did he know it was the third Hokage that was giving him the Fuinjutsu scrolls through his Anbu ninja. The scrolls were coming straight from the joint Namikaze Uzumaki sealing scrolls the Yonde man his wife had set aside for their child if they had ever met their demise. It was the third's way of keeping the child's mind off his seemingly permanent predicament, and if there was ever a need for Naruto to have a way to defend himself, it was when the budding seal master was 11 years old that the third Hokage got the shock of his life. The boy had been making progress in his seal work so fast that on his 11th birthday, he was a level 8 seal master. Aside from his regular request for an increase in his supply of training scrolls and using every inch of every scroll he was given to further his understanding of seals, Naruto had been ensuring that he kept his primary goal in mind. He spent half a day scouring his scrolls and then spent the rest of the day cracking seals to their basic strokes and separating them so he knew the combinations to make. He tested them on the dead rats in his hovel-like apartment, hoping and praying for their legs to even twitch minutely. His breakthrough finally came when the dead rat scampered erratically around his apartment as if it was being electrocuted. The creature was still as dead as a doorstop, it was only his lower half that was moving, but it was the result he had been searching for. As the rat was running around limply, his fingers tapped the table periodically. When it slowed down, it froze for half a second and continued moving about madly. He called it a forced movement seal. Its inspiration, surprisingly, was obtained from a barrier seal. The barrier seal was powered by the user's chakra. If the person ever stopped the flow, then the barrier would momentarily lose its integrity and crumble. But if the flow was continuous until the barrier was no longer needed, then it could withstand the full brunt of numerous lightning jutsu. The force movement seal functioned almost the same way. One part of the seal would be placed on his useless leg, and the other would be in the palm of his hand. Though it was still unfinished, the seal in the leg was to send some chakra to the main chakra points in his legs and the muscles to stimulate movement. The one in his hand was inspired by the walkie-talkies he saw the villagers' children played with. The seal in his palm is where he would channel the chakra and it would immediately go to the leg seal. The only thing that remained was to add a chakra battery in case he ever forgot to channel chakra and to make sure it wouldn't inflict too much strain on himself. He shakily controlled the epileptic rat to him and scanned over the dead body for any wounds or strained muscles. Success. No problems whatsoever. He covered his mouth hastily and giggled. No better time like the present, don't overdo it. No worries, Caillou. I've got this. He overloaded the seal on the paper, a severe downside of the Wonder Seal, and both leg and palm seals dissolved into small drops of ink. He placed his left hand on the ground and began the long process of drawing the seals. After drawing the seals flawlessly on his palm and his right leg, here goes nothing, he channeled a trickle of chakra to warm the seal up and steadily increased the flow. His eyes widened when he felt his dead leg twitch again and again. He scrambled to his hands and knees and pushed himself up. He fell. He grunted in frustration and pushed off the ground again, stumbling around and smashing back first into the wall. He tried to get his legs back under control, but the limbs rebelled and began kicking around. It surprised him that it was both of his legs that went against him. The left leg kicked a hole through his wall, and his right axe kicked the only table he had. He reduced the chakra flow into the seal, and when he felt his legs crumble under him, he jump-started it again, the rebellion reduced to only a barely perceived muscle twitch this time. The moment he began walking he felt like a newborn baby, bumbling and crashing into furniture, but since he didn't exactly have anywhere to go for a while, he used the week to get used to walking. Then he went to the Hokage's office. Naruto. In the flesh. The last time Hiruzen Sarutobi had seen Naruto he was a short 5-year-old boy with dazzling blonde hair and healthily bronzed skin. Now he looked malnourished. His dull blonde hair flopped weakly on his head. He noticed the jaggedness of the edges and assumed Naruto had been cutting his hair. His hair became an afterthought as the third Hokage realized how the boy's skin was too pale and veiny. His skin was pallid and his body was underweight, his clothes looked like they hadn't been washed in a long time. Through the large holes in the boy's clothes, he saw the purple bruises and the healing stab wounds turn scars. The horrifying stab wounds were so large that you would have to be blind to not notice them and how numerous they were. He knew if he was to check Naruto's whole body he would find more. In summary, he looked at the direct contrast of how one in his lineage was meant to be treated. The Hokage held his face and restrained the tears that wanted to fall. His anguished thoughts echoed in his head, how could it have gotten this bad? Though he was the one to send the training scrolls to Naruto through one of his ninjas, he hadn't personally checked up on him, even through his scrying ball. He has failed to protect Naruto and he knew it. He lifted his head, and though Naruto hid it well, he saw the major distrust in his eyes and the way his fingers kept tapping his supposed-to-be dead thigh. Hello? Lord Third, are you still there? There was another reason he had failed, Naruto used to call him grandfather. He put his best game face on and allowed his mouth to fall open when he finally noticed Naruto was standing. The pale blonde took his surprise in stride. Pretty neat, huh? How? There was this nice guy that gave me these scrolls on Fuinjutsu, it was so interesting I just had to learn it. The level of mastery he has to have to create a seal to do this is amazing. He cleared his throat, saying for the boy to hear, well done, Naruto. He watched, confused, as Naruto deflated and his shining expression dimmed. The man asked, is there a problem? Gramps, I mean Lord Third, I came to sign up for the academy. I may be a bit too old but with hard work and dedication I can. I'm sorry Naruto, but you can't be admitted. The old man cut him off before Naruto could fall into a nervous rant. Why not? The Hokage waved for a cat mask wearing ninja to stand down after the boy's outburst, saying, technically you still can't walk. But I can. Look at me. He stomped around the room and stumbled after 2 steps. He cursed foully and stood up so he could walk around again. I can walk fine. I can see the strain it has on you, it's only a little. I'll get used to it. The answer is still no. You're unhealthy and you're weak. He saw the respect the boy had for him, the little left, falling out of Naruto's eyes as tears. And whose fault is that? Sarutobi sighed, pinching his nose and closing his eyes. Naruto, tell me who's to blame. He used a dirty sleeve to wipe his eyes, trying to stand upright, but wilting, as his trembling forced him to hold onto a chair. I spent the last 7 years finding a way to walk so I can finally be a ninja, and you won't even give me a chance to prove myself. I was just being honest, a weak ninja is not only a risk to their teammates, but also a risk to the village. He motioned to Naruto's leg, where the seal was imprinted. The man discarded any softness in his tone, asking the boy, what if that seal got washed off by a water jutsu? Naruto faltered, piecing together a reply, only for the man to interject, exactly. I can make it more durable. Waterproof, even, I just need a bit more time. The answer is still no. The man placated the boy, sounding almost pleading, I can register you for civilian school. No. I want to be a ninja. Naruto, I'll say this once and only once, but you can't ever be a ninja. You can't ever be a ninja, ever. The Hokage's last words echoed around the room, into the listening ears of the hidden Anbu and the blonde boy. The boy took the proclamation very well. The tears stopped flowing, and his anguished face smoothed over. He didn't bow as he limped from the office, holding his head high, while his hands clenched the pockets of his pants hard enough for his knuckles to pop. Seeing the boy go and acknowledge he had just broken a child's dream, the Hokage went back to work. His heart berated him for his harsh words, but his mind drowned the voice out by saying it was to disillusion the boy. I told you he wouldn't agree. Yeah well, good for you. That wasn't what I meant. He hadn't seen the boy this defeated in a long time, his eyes were glassy, and his weak blonde hair seemed even weaker and duller than normal. Naruto was looking at the ceiling with his face a perfect mask of expressionlessness. His shirt was off and his hands were tracing the latest scar he had, near his belly button. He deeply wondered why he hadn't set up barrier seals and alarm seals around his apartment. Maybe it was because of the childish hope that the people in the village would finally see he wasn't bad. He chuckled dryly at the thought, murmuring under his breath, they'd never accept me. HN. You were right, heck you're always right, they would never accept me. Naruto rubbed his face and sat up. His eyes moved to the scraps of paper scattered all over his apartment. On the pieces of paper were unfinished and imperfect seals. The seals that were good enough were neatly stacked beside his broken table. He pumped some chakra into the seal and stumbled to the neat pile of paper. What should I do, Caillou? I'm not exactly the best at giving advice. This wasn't true, it was the Kyuubi that had pushed him into studying Fuinjutsu, and it was also the great beast that picked him up whenever he fell. Kyuubi was always there. Always. The boy knelt beside the pile and blankly looked over the pieces of paper. I don't know what to do with myself anymore. The only reason I invented this seal was to be a ninja, and you saw how that turned out. Then prove them wrong. Make something out of nothing. What do you mean? Let's be honest, kid, I can't stand this place, and neither can you. Naruto didn't even raise any complaints. You have potential to soar, I can see it, but this place is weighing you down. What should I do? He already knew what the beast was about to suggest, he just wanted it to say it in no uncertain words. I propose we make our paradise. Somewhere that appreciates you, with people that truly value you. Naruto laughed breathily. I'm being serious. If this place will not see you for who you are, then either go somewhere else or make your own place. Kyuubi got to its feet and addressed the boy, not in its lazy, dismissive voice, but with a passion that woke the boy up from his depressive stupor. The spark I saw when you started learning Fuinjutsu has turned into a forest fire. That forest fire has the potential to burn brighter and hotter than any star in the sky. Believe me, Naruto. The boy was taken aback by his friend using his name, and a strong heat building up in Naruto's stomach told him how passionate the beast truly was about Naruto's future. You are destined for greatness. Assuming I agree with you, how do you suppose I leave? I barely know how to walk. The great beast chuckled darkly after hearing what the boy had said. Baby steps. Remember what I said all those years ago. In Fuinjutsu, the possibilities are endless. The Jinchuriki blinked slowly and comprehension finally dawned on him, as well as ideas for more seals. He couldn't stop himself, he picked up a random sheet of paper and began scrawling over it, crafting and drawing a seal that would soon propel him into global recognition. He made a wrong stroke, discarded the paper and began anew on another empty scroll. When he was done, he crawled to a pile of dirty clothes and slipped the scroll under it. He shuffled a bit away and drew a clean X on the seal on his belly. Naruto steadied his breathing and channeled chakra into the X seal. The seal Naruto had drawn was a fractured variation of his forced movement seal. He removed the limiter on the original seal so it could make the whole body move under a constant flow of chakra. The other difference was that it wasn't his body he wanted to use, the X on the Kyuubi containment seal was a contact point to channel chakra. He aimed to extract the Kyuubi's essence and hopefully some of its chakra and have it outside. He called it the forced animation seal. Note. Not reanimation. It worked. Kind of. He channeled his chakra instead of Kyuubi's to the seal on his belly and a small orange-red spark of chakra erupted. It lasted for only half a second, the seal sparked again, but this time the orange-red spark crawled down his belly and leaped straight into the bundle of clothes. Meanwhile, Naruto's endurance turned out to be a blessing. He gnashed his teeth painfully and clawed the ground, leaving jagged tracks from his nails. The spark disappeared and Naruto felt lighter. He breathed a sigh of relief and lifted his head to look at the bundle. The dirty clothes on the ground bubbled and spurted out small bits of dirt. The center spun in a sort of whirlpool and rose into the air till it was exactly Naruto's height if he was standing. The clothes whirlpool stopped turning and the clothes tightened around its middle. Naruto could make out a left chest, then a belly button, then a malnourished arm slopped out of where arms were supposed to be. This process continued until the head popped out from between the shoulders. It was wrapped in a sandy brown scarf, leaving only its red sclera eyes to shine through the bindings. The boy hesitantly reached out to his creation, stiffening when the animated bundle of clothes bent down till it was at eye level to him and blinked. The creature coughed, clearing his throat with a lot of effort. "Mama, Master Naruto." Its voice was gravelly and dangerous. It flexed his fingers in front of its face curiously, and when it noticed his creator was trying to get up, he hastily helped him up, displaying a surprising show of strength with arms so stick-like, and gently eased the boy onto his wheelchair. The young seal master kept on silently watching as the cloth creation shuffled around the room and curiously touched whatever caught its attention. The boy was a mix of apprehension, elation, and curiosity, and so was the beast inside him. Kyuubi, what have I done? I can't sense your dark half. Not most of it. You must have pulled it out of yourself instead of me. The nine-tails scratched its head and continued. What I don't understand is why it called you master. Darker halves don't refer to anyone as their master. Kyuubi then immersed itself in the theories spinning in its head, muttering as Naruto keenly listened, but darker halves aspire to reach the light and take over it. I think it calls you master because, technically, you have taken it to the light, but it doesn't seem to want to take over it. I can't sense any ill will toward you. Quite frankly, it's a version of you with no human inhibitions. Naruto's darker half punched a hole through a picture of the Sandaime Naruto had forgotten he had. It also seems to know what you're thinking. The blonde processed this information while still supplying chakra to his darker self. This wasn't what he wanted, not in the least. He didn't even know he had a darker half. Still, he wasn't one to waste an opportunity. He whistled for the other Naruto's attention. What should I name you? The cloth creation scampered to him and fell on its knees before him, groveling at his feet. Master shall name me. Fine then. I'll call you Daku, the Dark One. Excellent name, Master. Daku wrung its hands nervously. What should Daku do for Master? I want to know what you can do. He waved his arm, and Daku ran to his bed and came with his blanket from the top, dropping it on Naruto's lap neatly, and the supposedly crippled boy proceeded to drape the thin cloth on his legs, saying, let's find an empty training ground. Daku was a special thing. There was no limit to its strength, and it found it exceedingly hard to control. It tried petting a rabbit and ended up crushing its head. He tried stroking the bark of a tree and carved out a deep portion of it. He already had plans in his head to control Daku's strength and transfer it to other aspects of its body. The Dark One didn't have any proper chakra network. He had a belly filled with chakra, and he had thick cylinders that spread out from his belly to his arms, legs and head. This network was so underdeveloped and wasteful that Naruto pitied the cloth creation. The amount of chakra needed to run around the secluded training ground more than once was enough to make 6 giant fireballs consecutively while water walking on a rapid stream. Naruto would agree that he had a large store of chakra, larger than even the Hokages, but the creation burned off so much of it took a toll on him. If he was anyone else, the chakra drain would have killed him. Daku was fast and accompanied by his strength. Naruto was sure it could face off against any elite jounin and hold its own. The problem lay with the fact that it didn't have any tangible fighting style. He grew more and more ashamed watching it punch and kick randomly. He was at least happy when Daku told him he could read. It was very flexible and dexterous with the way he could contort itself in painful ways without wincing. Daku could create sharp starched strong cloth stakes out of its hands and any part of its body. The stakes were strong enough, but he deduced a well-timed blow could shatter them. Daku had an amazing memory. It could remember whatever it was told to the very last detail. It could also perform the tasks to the best of its ability, the only problem being its still uncontrollable strength. After a thorough assessment, his first order for the chakra creation was to spy on a chunin training and memorize anything he or she did, whether the person was practicing taijutsu, jinjutsu, shuriken jutsu or stealth, anything was fine, and since it didn't need any food for nourishment, only the supply of chakra, then it could stay and observe everyone that trained for days and days. A week of observation later and Daku came back. He wrote all he learned down on several scrolls, adding drawings when necessary. The handwriting was legible enough for Naruto. He commanded the Dark One to learn it all and go back and learn more. He grew not to be surprised by the level of detail Daku took to using to write and draw all he observed. The observation took Daku 3 months before he was fairly proficient in anything. And from here I'll start calling Daku, he nodded. When he was sure Daku was stealthy enough, he commanded him to start reading scrolls from the library on all the ninja aspects. The Dark One read so fast it took him 2 minutes to finish up a ninjutsu scroll filled with D-rank jutsu. He was then commanded to learn other things like carpentry, masonry, mining, and politics. There was only so much Daku could learn from a book, so he took him deep into the forest to cut down trees and craft the simplest of things. It was among Naruto's daily routines, alongside practicing and polishing his sealwork, to instruct Daku on what to construct with his meager knowledge of carpentry. Naruto had Daku carved out a replica of an adult skeletal frame out of wood, with smooth pebbles as the joints and thin wires to keep the jaw hinged to the skull. He took the scroll that had pulled the Dark One out of Naruto and improved it, adding a chakra battery to store up excess chakra and feed it to him. With the way Daku consumed so much chakra, the battery would be used plenty of times. The battery was like Daku's brain, almost limitless. There was a limit, it was just that it would take a lot of chakra to reach it. He put the scroll safely in the chest cavity of the wooden skeleton and watched in satisfaction as Daku returned. The Dark One pulled rocks and loose pieces of clothes to the skeleton till the wooden bones were covered by tan-covered materials. The head was still covered in an eerie turban, this time it was a camo brown, and within the turban held piercing red eyes. The clothes he wore were unassuming shinobi clothes, stolen little by Daku over weeks. The long-sleeved shirt and pants were pitch black, the shinobi jacket was camo brown, and the sandals were brown. Gloves prevented the stakes from sliding out, and he didn't need a mask to hide his identity. The stakes were not starched clothes anymore, they were either made of wood or stones. He mentally reminded himself to instruct Daku to steal some marbles, and if possible, diamonds. A skeleton made from diamonds would make Daku unstoppable. He stopped himself, baby steps. The rocks under the cloth skin increased his strength tenfold, but drastically reduced his speed and stealth, so it took another month to get it back to Daku's equilibrium. They also had to look into chakra control exercises to reduce how much chakra it took to use any jutsu. The Dark One could compress his chakra so small that it could be equal to the size of a baseball, which was as far as hiding his presence could get. It was enough for the average shinobi, but he was sure a sensor would detect him. He had drawn separate limiter seals on each of the Dark One's body parts, so the chakra usage would drastically reduce and the muscle power would develop even more. Naruto, as he was training Daku, didn't abandon his speciality. Daku had memorized some scroll he had found in the library about sealing and progressed all the more into it. He was now brushing into level 9 level of mastery in Fuinjutsu, but he just couldn't get past it to level 10. He practiced walking but preferred using his wheelchair, which he couldn't resist but augment. He had written custom-made seals on it and removed the wheels. The purpose of the seals was so that it could hover over the ground with accumulated wind chakra directly from his chakra network. It wasn't too fast, but he wasn't too focused on speed, more on efficiency. When the genin from the academy graduated, Daku was also ready to face the world. Naruto had Daku create shadow clones to scout outside Konoha's walls. The news was always the same, nothing of importance. He planned to either take over an existing village and then the country, or he would create his village and then take over the country. Naruto grew more adventurous and sent Daku out further to the nearest village to learn if it had the qualities he was looking for. Then, Daku found it. The land of Wave wasn't a village, it was an island country. But it might as well be a large hovel situated on a semi-wasteland. The people were crippled by poverty and destitution, crime was at an all-time high, they were being oppressed by an external force, and their daimyo was too weak to do anything about it. When Naruto got Daku's report, the boy beamed. Drawing up a plan of action, he soon instructed the loyal creation to go and liberate the country, transferring half of its control to Daku, who had specific instructions to make it known he wasn't the true leader until Naruto could come out and claim the position. If Daku performed his mission to the letter, which was all the time, then Naruto would soon have the loyalty of a country under his grasp. Master wants me to go to Wave Country and set it free, keep the country for Master until Master is ready to come out publicly. Daku would go, I will go and do as Master instructs, because Daku is for Master, and Master alone was the lone repetitive thought of Naruto's loyal creation. Daku speeds towards Konoha's borders. He was a vague shadow that bounced off trees and rocks till it reached the water border of Wave Country. He hummed to himself and took a tentative step onto the surface of the water, nodding when he didn't sink and continued with blurring speed to the nearest village, which so happened to be the place the Wave daimyo and the tyrant that took over Wave resided. From all the books on politics he had been reading he deduced that he would need to end the threat before meeting with the daimyo. Still, before he could do either he had to get the people of Wave ready for the gross amount of change that was about to happen. The village and the country had the potential to be one of the richest and most well-protected places if the government handled it right. The water was a good way to trade with other places, and the water also provided some security against invasion. Then there were the natural resources caked up in the ground. When he got to the other side, he stopped so he could think of a plan to prepare the poor people for Naruto's entry into their lives. Unlike the first time Daku was here, he wasn't trying to be stealthy or quiet, so he was half prepared when one of the 7 swordsmen of the mist attacked him. He heard the whirring of a large blade, and that was all the warning he got. He ducked and slipped into the tree line, waiting for his attacker to show him or herself. His patience paid off when Zabuza seemingly appeared on the sword and blinked in confusion when he didn't see the mysterious person or his headless corpse. The swordsman hopped off his lodged weapon and cleanly pulled it out. Come on out, stranger. Daku assumed he was one of the tyrant's hired hands, so he would have to go through him before he could get to Gato. Not one for theatrics, he blurred out of the underbrush and shoulder tackled straight into Zabuza before he could realize his presence, or so he thought, until the Zabuza on the ground turned into a puddle of water. He performed a flawless one-sealed body replacement in time for the legendary head cleaver to impact where he formerly was. I have to say, stranger, you sure are fast. Let's get this over with, who do you work for and why are you here? His answer was water bullets shooting out of the darkness in the forest and smashing into the flat side of his sword. His feet shuffled backwards from the effort of holding himself against the onslaught. Deku, with his left forearm to his fingers now a stone stake and coming out from another side, kicked Zabuza, grunting in displeasure when he again turned into water. His hearing warned him that an attack was coming from behind. He capitalized on the knowledge and raised his stake hand to intercept the blow, but was forced to slide back when the sword cleaved clean through his weapon. Zabuza swiped again and Deku bent down, rolled to the swordsman and shot up under him with a precise and deadly uppercut. The movement was so fast that the swordsman only had time to substitute himself after the attack. Deku split the substituted log in half with a newly formed stake. He hummed in displeasure and caught the small spurt of smoke in the bushes before he went through a short chain of hand seals, making sure to pump as little chakra as his control would allow. Deku inhaled into his non-existent lungs, pronouncing the jutsu in his mind, wind release. Great breakthrough. The wind he exhaled surged over and through the forest, forcing the air rank missing ninja to dig his sword into the ground as trees and chunks of ground were torn out from the earth. Deku made a water clone, and the clone sank into the ground, shooting out underneath the unsuspecting missing ninja. The real Deku stopped his onslaught and barreled into the forest, shoulder tackling Zabuza, and began laying waste to his face, slamming jarring blow after blow. Until 4 needles sank into his back, where his chakra points were meant to be, but since his chakra network was still too underdeveloped, it only jammed into his arms and lower back. The ice needles lodged into his rocky muscles and slowed him down for the ninja under him to kick him away. Deku hummed sourly and flexed his lean muscles, the needles popped out as he did so. He whipped around and blocked the coming onslaught of ice needles with both arms, turning them into rock stakes. As he did that, he made numerous water clones to fish the secret attacker out. The ice attack stopped just as the last clone disappeared into the darkness. He turned his red stare to the injured swordsman as Zabuza crept into Deku's guard, grunting with mild annoyance, and swung a punch into the man's abdomen as he ducked a horizontal sword slice. The man was pushed back and Deku followed with more dizzyingly fast kicks and punches till Zabuza had his back to a lopsided tree. The large sword was discarded, far from Zabuza's reach. Deku summoned a stake and pinned both of the man's shoulders to the tree with it, breaking the man's shins with 2 swift kicks. He stepped back to admire the grotesque display, tuning out the colorful swears coming from Zabuza's mouth. Deku's clone surged out of the forest with an unconscious hunter ninja on one of their shoulders. The one that brought the attacking ninja came to him and gingerly dropped him to the ground. One of the clones reported to the original Deku, missed hunter ninja by the looks of it, but I assume he works for Zabuza. They both turned to the cursing swordsman. The clone picked up Zabuza's fallen sword and handed it to his boss. What should we do? Deku dispelled the rest of the clones, leaving the one he was talking to. The clone crossed his arms and watched over the unconscious hunter ninja, as well as Deku, as he impaled the head cleaver sword into the ground, addressing Zabuza with a calm monotone, "We need Gato's location. Tell us or else." The wild man spat at him. "You don't have the guts." On the contrary, Deku went to the hunter ninja and flipped him onto his stomach, stepping on the down boy's left shoulder and grasping his left arm. "I don't exactly have the heart to care." He pulled and when he heard the resounding pop of a shoulder dislocating, he released the boy's arm. The boy's eyes shot open and he let loose a pained yell, desperately trying to crawl away, but the Deku clone stepped on his back, stopping any escape. "Where is Gato hiding? Leave the kid alone." "Only I know where Gato is." "Also on the contrary, I know you do, but it's now clear you care about this child." He hadn't bothered to remove the boy's hunter ninja mask, hearing the ragged grating gasps for air from the pained boy. Deku grasped the other arm, and the boy's struggling started anew. Deku made to pull out another shoulder, but the swordsman yelled for him to stop. Zabuza let his head sag. "Fine, I'll tell you where he's staying. Just leave him out of this, please." Wise decision. Deku let go of the boy's arm and dispelled his clone, kicking the boy's hand when he wanted to throw ice enban at his aggressor. Deku told him in a matter-of-fact tone, "I thought we've established those are useless against me." Deku stand down. The boy did so wearily. "He's staying far east from here. His place is huge. Surrounded by armed guards and attack dogs, you can't miss it." He groaned in pain when Deku yanked out the rock stakes, letting the man fall to his behind. "For your compliance, you will live. Your death would serve no purpose to my master." Who are you?" the masked boy whispered. "I am Deku, the great master's loyal right hand." He turned away. "My master would reveal himself when he is ready. Prepare to submit to him when he calls you," and with those chilling words, Deku blurred out in the general direction of the nearest village. He summoned clones, and they hinged into various generic-looking people with one goal in mind. To spread the word that change was coming. Whispers all over the town began after he had dispelled his clones. "Did you hear what that guy said? He said Wave is going to be saved. He says a great change is coming." "I don't believe him. Gato is too powerful." The way he described this man, I'm not sure what to think. If a stranger says change is coming, I don't know about you, but I'll believe anything right now. What did he say we shouldn't inform the daimyo? I don't know, and I just don't know. With his job in the village done, Daku untiringly ran to Gato's hideout. If he had a heart or even the smallest of consciences, then what he saw would have sent him into a blind rage. Young females were being passed around by the thugs. From what Daku had heard from the apparent leader of the hired hands, then the girls were part of the payment Gato would give them. Daku tried to summon any emotion he had observed from his master and settled his turban-covered face in a displeased scowl, humming disapprovingly when a man roughly groped a girl 2 times younger than him. The only thing that had motivated him to aid those poor girls before he headed into the stronghold was that it was what master would do and it would greatly benefit his master's plans in the long run. He memorized all the faces of the thugs in a section of his mind for items of least importance. He wouldn't need their faces if they were dead, and he assigned a clone to each one, sending them away to kill the hired hands outside. The mercenaries didn't even have the time to blink before solid stone stakes were driven through the back of their heads. The clones had to swiftly cover the young girls' mouths to prevent them from screaming, and with a harsh glare, they non-verbally nodded to show their cooperation. The clones knocked the girls out and carried their limp bodies to their boss. Daku dispelled all the clones except one and assigned the solitary clone to guard the girls, casting a genjutsu over them to make sure they stayed asleep. The real Daku stealthily crept into the unguarded fortress, slinking from shadow to shadow like a phantom. From a guess, he would say the guards remaining were a little over 2 dozen. Now there were 2 ways to go about exterminating the threat. He could plant bombs throughout the base, kidnap Gato and blow the place up before the hired hands knew what was happening. He picks off the survivors with his stakes. Or he could go in silently and assassinate who and whatever, taking Gato's head as proof of his death. He ran both scenarios in his head and chose the latter. The chakra consumption for using his stakes would wear him down, as well as the fact that it wouldn't be a clean job. So, like a grotesque spider, he skittered on the wall, going from room to room, and eradicated all who he perceived as a threat. He found some unwilling prostitutes with some of the men and quietly pointed for them to run to the entrance. He cleanly and mercilessly killed till he dropped behind Gato and jammed his bloody stake arm through his back, pulling it out, with Gato's heart impaled at the end, and watched in grim satisfaction as the man died drowning in his blood. The next step was the daimyo. The poor daimyo didn't even have enough security to pose as much threat as the dead thug, so he dispatched the old man effectively. The daimyo had to die because he was the one who introduced the tyrant to his country in hopes of looting from his people, but the plan backfired when Gato's greed overpowered the daimyo. Daku found all that out after he had killed the daimyo. Daku looked down on both men, then up at the gathering villagers. He stood in the center of the village silently, an imposing figure hovering over the dead bodies of the tyrant and their weak daimyo. His red eyes glowed so ominously that no one dared to speak for a while. Daku raised his right hand, forming a clean stake, and shot it into the 2 dead men's chests to confirm to all of them that they were dead. All that bore witness cringed in phantom pain. "You." A dirty orphan said from the safety of the far back, "You're the change." "I am part of the change." He kicked both dead men into the crowd. Other part of the change concerns this village and, by clear extension, this country's total submission. To who? Another person yelled, a fisherman by the looks of him. "To my master. He has seen how this country would be in the future under proper governance. He wishes to become the leader of this country. Anyone is better than those 2. Perfect." He unsealed a scroll and said out loud, "This is what my master wishes you all to do before he can make himself known." Back in Konoha, just as Daku left for his indefinitely long mission, Naruto sat in an open forest, sketchpad in hand and pencil smoothly running over the page, drawing in perfect detail the general flight pattern of a swallow. He sat in his special wheelchair, his faithful Daku clones guarding him from the shadows. The bird he was drawing, purely out of leisure, ruffled its feathers and began singing. The boy's pale skin now looked better with all the food Daku had been stealing for him, though his hair could not go back to how vibrant it looked again. He wasn't particularly picky over how he looked, so he didn't bother dyeing it. He wore a simple white shirt with deep blue stripes on the shoulders and sides, with baggy black pants that perfectly hid his legs. He had on blue sandals that he was sure hadn't touched the ground yet. His legs were bound securely by a seatbelt in case he ever had to defend himself unexpectedly. He grunted sourly and neatly rubbed out a useless line from the bird's wing, and then he continued with his facial features plain and peaceful. The drawing depicted the phases a bird goes through before it can take off the ground or off a branch. Though not noticed at first, it was fairly easy to understand. He hummed a tune and continued sketching. He felt a faint tingle on the right arm of his hovering but currently on the ground wheelchair, signifying that someone he wasn't familiar with had breached his alarm seals. The Daku clones weren't intercepting the person, so he or she wasn't too much of a threat. His suspicions were confirmed when, from the corner of his eyes, he noticed a pair of pale pupilless eyes watching him. He didn't break composure whatsoever, he wanted the person to make him or herself known. Naruto turned to where a Deku clone was hiding an hour of watching later and flicked his eyes at the hiding person. 2 minutes later the clone dropped down in front of him, Hinata on his shoulder, and disappeared before she could see who had gotten her. The 12-year-old girl scrambled to her feet shakily, red-faced and embarrassed. Not even bothering to look at her, the young Fuinjutsu user went back to his sketching. From the regular reports he had gotten from Deku, which were stored in blood seals under his bed, the girl in front of him was Hyuga Hinata, heiress to the Hyuga clan, has confidence problem and daddy problems. Why are you here, Hyuga? He didn't see it, but the girl blushed, stumbling over her words pitifully before she could say anything coherent. I haven't seen you before. I'm clearly not a threat. I am so. I don't need sympathy, he cut her off calmly, briefly looking at the swallow, and then back to what he was drawing. Hinata gulped and twiddled her fingers. She tried to change the topic. Nice wee weather we have I agree, the weather is nice, perfect for relaxing. She looked down at what he was drawing and marveled at how majestic he made a common bird look, making her appreciate it all the more. What is your name, if you don't mind me asking? My name is Hinata. He hadn't even looked up. Naruto. She went in for the figurative kill again. You have a nice name, Naruto. Thank you. He came right out and asked, why are you still here, Hinata? She tilted her head slightly. I don't understand. This time he looked up and she had to hold herself from stepping into his personal space. I make you uncomfortable and you're meant to be training with your team by now. How did why you know? I've been coming to this spot since I was 9 to draw whenever I have time, and a few months ago your team made the training ground your own. I see. Hinata. Where are you, Hinata? They both turned to the forest where they heard her name being called. You're needed, it seems. She nodded and made to run into one of the thicker parts of the forest, but stopped just at the edge. Would I see you again? Naruto shrugged and went back to his bird sketching, maybe when I'm less busy. She nodded and went back to her team. What do you think, Deku? From my boss's observations she does not like harming others. Her heart is too soft to be an effective shinobi. I know that. I mean, do you think she should be part of my plans? It would be an enjoyable addition, Naruto. The boy scratched his chin as he thought more about it. Yes, she will be an enjoyable addition. A short smirk graced his plain face as he looked at where the girl had disappeared. His plans were all in the long term, and his intentions for the girl solidified in his head. It would be a fun project. Deku's clone wholeheartedly agreed. Our protagonist was currently looking over a full-scale map of Wave Country. The Dark One had come back with the good news that the people there had not put up a fuss when the country was claimed, and so far, they still didn't have any complaints. Naruto was outlining crucial parts of the island country to raise walls and place harsh security seals to prevent external attacks. There were several Deku water clones still in the village, their purpose was to aid in the construction of houses and ships for trading, looting Gatos and the daimyo's strongholds, and maintaining general internal security. He was still patting himself on the back for seeing the potential in the country. Trees were abundant and the soil was rich, so there wasn't a lack of raw materials for buildings. The problems lay in the fact that water pollution from the dead tyrant had killed and scared off water life from around the island. Naruto planned to clean it up to attract them back. The villagers were feeding off of Gato's food storage, which so happened to be enough for a while. He had the perfect barrier seals to place on the borders, and the Deku clones were as tireless as their boss, so the wall would be complete in no time. He had to focus mainly on security first before he could properly face internal affairs. Naruto hovered his chair over to a neat stack of paper and selected a dozen from the top of the pile. He hovered back to his former position and handed the seals to the real Deku. These are permanent, they're on paper, but when they contact the ground and my chakra is poured in, they tattoo themselves to the ground. Place them on these points on the island and have your clones start construction on the walls immediately after they are placed. They must start after the seals are placed, behind the walls. If they are behind the walls then seal masters cannot access them to create counter seals. Understood. Deku bowed. Yes master. And he marched out of the apartment. The young Fuinjutsu master then went to his window, the one overlooking the village, and mused on what to do next, whether to start rehabilitating the wave's dying economy or to start training the people to defend the country. He was broken out of his thoughts when the X-contact seal on his stomach tingled and Deku landed softly beside him. He was sure he was the real one because of how the seal reacted to his presence. There has been a small hitch in the plans, master. He was on one of his knees and his eyes were on the ground. At ease Deku. The boy still stayed where he was, looking out the window with one hand propping his head up and the other arm on his wheelchair. What's the problem? The Dark One stood up smoothly. I was on my way out of the village when I saw two genin teams assembled before the gate. How is that a problem? Botham is a bridge builder that had come to this village months ago to seek aid. Their function is to protect him against anyone Gato sends to kill him, but he didn't tell them the complete truth. The mission is a C rank and not an A rank. The people of Wave have tried sending messages for him to come back, but from his stance, he thinks those messages are traps. The pale blonde boy furrowed his eyebrows in deep thought. Which genin teams are on his protection detail? Team 7 consisting of their squad leader, Hada Kakashi, and the genin Uchiha Sasuke, Haruno Sakura and Sai, the pale, nameless boy that just appeared after their graduation. He said, intrigued as he swiveled to face the creation. He is not on the reserve genin list, Kano has birth registry or even registered as an immigrant. I suspect he works for a higher power, send a clone to find out all it can about him, and if he isn't a threat, then he should report back. Aku snapped his fingers and a shadow clone popped into existence, saluted to both of them and blurred out of the apartment. Continue. Team 10 consists of their squad leader, Sarutobi Asuma, and the genin are Yamanaka Ino, Akamichi Chouji and Nara Shikamaru. Hearing the last name, Naruto scowled lightly. Nara, precisely, master. Should I dispatch him in Wave? No, if he dies in foreign territory, it could be seen as an act of war. Wave would be destroyed before it could raise any sort of defense. What is the mental condition of the people of Wave? Most are still suffering trauma from the despotic rule, and others are recovering from critical malnourishment. What have you done about it? I have made Henjid water clones to speak with those traumatized as a way to vent out their feelings. It took a while for them to become familiar with them, but they are now fully expressing themselves. The cure would have to do until we can recruit a psychologist to the country. Numerous clones have also been sent outside Wave to hunt and gather for the hungry, while the farms we have planted are growing, quite fast might I add, and the animals are still breeding. Naruto wasn't particularly in a rush to send Deku out because he was fairly sure the genin teams with Tazuna were going at a civilian pace. Excellent. I want you to go back to Wave as quickly as possible and spy on the security detail. If they get past the borders, try and scare them off. If they are adamant, retreat and allow them passage. Still, spy on them during their stay and if they get too nosy, stop them. Use only the same amount of force used against you. Nothing more, nothing less. Yes, master. Curious was the thought of the legendary copy ninja, Hada Kakashi as he waltzed past a puddle of water. He discreetly sent hand signals to his fellow Jounin sensei, Sarutobi Asuma, who nodded and calmly walked past the puddle. Kakashi's genin team were taking the lead, Asuma's were bringing up the back, and the client, Tazuna, was safely nestled in the middle. None of the genin besides Sai and Sasuke noticed the non-verbal conversation. It was silent as they got a few meters away from the puddle until clank. Click. One down. Asuma sensei. A small body of water exploded upwards, bringing out two masked ninjas that had a thick spike chain between them. They had just finished off Asuma and were now charging through the hole in the formation's defense, supposedly to Kakashi. The Jounin blinked in confusion at their target, which so happened to be him, and didn't react on time when a chain wrapped around him and turned him into minced meat. Two down. Kakashi-sensei. Azuna cursed foully and hid behind the two female members of the joint genin mission, while Sasuke and Sai ran at the demon brothers. Sasuke threw a kunai straight and true at the chain and pinned the metal to a tree behind them. The demon brothers were forced to dislocate their joint weapon and fight the two boys separately. The Uchiha seemed to have overestimated his taijutsu prowess. He was forced to keep dodging poison-tipped claws without seeing the smallest opening to attack. Sai, on the other hand, was doing well enough. He was parrying the claws with a small tanto that had come out of his paintbrush. Out of nowhere a massive bouncing ball of flesh landed solidly on the Chunin battling Sasuke, and the one facing Sai froze abruptly. Shadow possession success, Shikamaru drawled. Both team sensei dropped down from the trees utterly unharmed. Well done, all of you, Asuma said to the joint genin team. Sensei. You're alive. Both girls screamed. The two Jounins rolled their eyes. Yeah, good work. Now relax while I go and interrogate these two. He tied up the twitching demon brother that had been flattened by Chouji's meat tank and also tied up the other demon brother still being held by Shikamaru's shadow possession. He dragged both brothers to a tree, facing away from the genin. Who do you work for? We're not talking, the conscious brother spat. Oh well, I tried. He gingerly pulled out a kunai and was about to stab the Chunin's arm, but he was forced to catch a lightning-fast fist from a shadowy opponent. Who are you? The attacker hummed quietly and pulled his fist back, then threw down a smoke bomb. Shit, Kakashi muttered and tried using his normal eye to see through the smoke, cursing again when both the demon brothers and the mysterious attacker disappeared. Kakashi? Any problem? The third son shouted from the clearing. He had instructed the genin to rerun inventory to keep them busy. The copy ninja stalked out from behind the trees and stopped a few feet in front of the bridge builder. Yes. I believe Tazuna here has some explaining to do. What do you mean, sensei? Sakura asked. I mean, why would two Chunin missing ninjas ambush us on our way to Wave Country? They were going to attack Tazuna. Before I could interrogate them, someone just appeared and escaped with them. He folded his arms and glared at the bridge builder. Well. Go on. The older man stood strong against the glare, raising his head defiantly, but when the other Jounin glared at him he caved, telling them all the real reason he asked for a mission, why he didn't give the correct mission details, and what he intended during the mission. That's it, we're going back to Konoha. I'm going to wave, sensei, Sasuke grunted and crossed his arms. I'm not going to have any unfinished missions in my record. I'm going to. Ino and Sakura squealed and latched onto Sasuke's legs. What about you, Shikamaru? Do you want to go? It'd be too troublesome, but whatever. Yeah, whatever, Choji parroted. Asuma face palmed. We'll send a messenger hawk back to the Hokage and tell him about what happened, maybe send reinforcements if possible. With their unanimous decision made, they proceeded to wave. Aku looked down at the lone conscious demon brother and hummed dispassionately. You've failed your mission. He was looming over the brother, who was on his knees. From his right forearm, a stake shot out smoothly. What do you have to say for yourself? We're sorry, Aku. We were outnumbered and outgunned. Then why didn't you retreat and give a status report to Zabuza? The Dark One said coolly as he raised a stake arm to his face and looked at the groove lines running neatly from the base to the sharp tip. The demon brother began shaking. We just wanted to see if we could pick them off. We thought we had killed the copy ninja and the other Jounin. We are so sorry, Aku. Aku narrowed his red sclera eyes down at the quivering Chunin as he lowered his stake arm. Remember who you work for and next time think with your heads before you go for the kill. Do I make myself clear? The Chunin frantically nodded, repeatedly muttering his thanks. Get out of my sight. The Chunin picked his brother up and ran straight for Wave Country where they would receive medical treatment. His master planned to recruit the demon brothers to his army and offer them sanctuary and, when Wave's economy improved, eventual payment. The brothers weren't the only ones Naruto had hired. Aku retracted his stake and sprinted across the border, slipping into the darkness of the forest and navigating expertly till he dropped directly behind Zabuza. Daku had to duck a horizontal sword swipe immediately after. The mist-missing ninja grunted sourly and stood down when he saw it was his employer. What? The Dark One straightened up. Konoha ninjas are on their way. My master says we should dissuade their progress as much as possible, and if it can't be helped we should retreat and allow them through. He turned his head and looked at Haku, the masked hunter ninja, and continued, you are to provide support when it can't be helped. The boy nodded and fixed his mask before he sprang into a tree, hiding himself. They should be here in a few minutes. Wait for my signal. With those parting words, Daku faded into the darkness. Zabuza shivered. That guy gives me the heebie-jeebies. Haku giggled from his perch. Me too. Aku had dislocated his arm with the ease and disassociation of an unfeeling sociopath, and that memory still woke Haku up in a cold sweat, remembering the blank, almost bored red eyes as they bored into his skull, while Daku tore his arm from its shoulder socket. Self-preservation and the urge to be near such a force of nature for their protection was what kept Haku under Daku's employment, and how Zabuza could be convinced to stand to be around the creature that had so thoroughly thrashed him. Zabuza scoffed and mentally prepared himself for the fight that would most definitely come. He calmed his breathing and about 10 minutes later he heard a bird call from a distance, the signal that the Konoha ninjas were there. Showtime, kid, he said and swung his sword at the ninjas. Everybody duck. The ninjas took the yelled command to heart by lying flat on the ground. Sasuke forced Tazuna down fast enough for the lethal head-cleaving blade to waft over him and jam with a thud into a tree. They stood up and the genin took standard formation around their client as Zabuza appeared on his sword. Zabuza Mamachi, the demon of the bloody mist. The demon of the bloody mist chuckled darkly, sending tendrils of fear down the genin's spines, and grinned from under his face bandages. I see my reputation precedes me, Kakashi of the Sharingan. The Uchiha sharply turned to his team sensei. Sharingan. I'll tell you later. Kakashi waved the boy away, his eyes were still zeroed in on the missing ninja. Zabuza leapt off his sword, his hands dragging the blade with him, and landed softly on the ground. I guess you're here to assassinate Tazuna. It wasn't a question, it was a statement. You could say that. Zabuza leaned on his weapon as another ninja landed quietly beside him. You? Kakashi exclaimed with wide eyes. You're the one that took the demon brothers. Then he couldn't see the man too well with all the shadows cast by the trees, but now he could clearly distinguish the man in a camo turban, through which all he could see were eerie red eyes. Yes, I am. My name is Daku, and would you all be so kind as to leave Wave Country? Why should we leave? That is none of your business. I shall only say this once more. Leave Wave Country and leave Tazuna behind if he wishes to stay. Technically Tazuna is our client and we can't guarantee his safety if we leave him, which leaves the option of force. Daku looked at Zabuza, instructing him, you handle the other Jounin while I deal with Kakashi. You six stay here and guard Tazuna, Kakashi said as a thick mist rolled around them. The joint genin teams were blasted with an invisible pressing force, as if the heavens had dropped a bag of stones on them, and they began to see the hundreds of ways they could die. Zabuza grinned and said his usual intimidating words. After hearing them, Sasuke contemplated stabbing himself and getting over it, but Kakashi halted him with his reassuring words, "Don't worry, I promise I'll protect all of you." I smiled and the mist covered him and Asuma from their vision. "Do not make empty promises, Kakashi," Deku said quietly and kicked Kakashi's right thigh, but the veteran Jounin raised his guard fast enough and blocked the blow, wincing when the limb met his guard. He made to punch Deku, but the Dark One blurred under his outstretched arm and savagely dealt an uppercut to the masked ninja's chin. The Jounin exploded into water half a second later. Water clone. He sprouted out a stake arm and batted some thrown shuriken away. He then slid away from a kick and raised his stake arm to block a kick. Kakashi grunted in pain when his leg met the solid stone stake and dropped it. He jumped up when Deku tried to sweep his legs from under him and axe kicked the creature as he came down. Deku crossed his arms and absorbed the full brunt of the blow, shuffling back involuntarily, and pushed the limb away. The two breathed out and flashed at each other, falling into a dizzyingly fast sequence of punches, kicks, blocks and parries. The mist blew away courtesy of Asuma's wind release. Great breakthrough, so all could behold the blazingly fast sequence of attacks both were dealing out to the other. Wow, Ino breathed and Sakura dumbly nodded in agreement. Sai though was busy observing the masked opponent his team sensei was battling against. He wasn't bearing the identifiers of a missing ninja hit 8 slashed out and he wasn't moving like someone who should have a spine, noticing the perfect somersault over Kakashi when the copy ninja attempted to slide a kunai through his chest. Kakashi thrust the blade forward again, but Deku wrapped his right arm over the man's arm and Spartan kicked him in his belly, throwing him away. "I had to limit my speed to Jounin level for you, and I have to say, I am very impressed, Kakashi." Deku looked at the blade he had taken from Kakashi, quirking an unseen brow at his reflection and facing Kakashi again, discarding the kunai. His voice or expression didn't convey his next words, telling Kakashi, limitations are exhilarating. The copy ninja grunted to his feet. "I take it that isn't as fast as you can go." "You're correct." Deku now had stakes coming out of both arms. "Now stop holding back." The orange masked man pulled down his mask so both of his eyes were exposed. "I plan on doing that." He brought out another kunai and sprinted at Deku, bringing both knives down on him. Deku raised an arm and caught the attack, kneeing Kakashi in his belly and elbowing him in the chest, so fast Kakashi felt the pain before the attack. He was thrown back again. Asuma was holding his own against the swordsman with his trench knives, often briefly looking at his fellow Jounin in between attacks. He sidestepped to smash and stabbed at Zabuza. The man lifted the flat side of his sword impossibly fast, and the two weapons clanged off each other. The missing ninja kicked Asuma and kicked again at his shoulder, but the third son wasn't a former fire guardian for nothing. He caught both kicks and spun the surprised ninja in the air. Zabuza used the aerial spin to slash his sword down, and Asuma flipped away from the sword slice and went through some hand seals. High release. Ash pile burning. He blew out billows of ash at the missing ninja, and when Zabuza was fully covered, Asuma gnashed his teeth together. Boom. The resounding concussive shockwave of the explosion rocked past him and hit Deku, who had just elbowed Kakashi away, throwing the creation into the water, as well as the copy ninja. Deku was the first one to recover, a bafflingly fast feat. He stood on top of the water and trapped Kakashi in a water release. Water prison. Zabuza, thinking he could hold out against the ash by holding his breath and closing his eyes, was thrown into the forest and safely caught by Haku. The man's breath was short and labored, and his body was severely burnt. His critical condition forced the ice user to knock the man out and focus all his attention on him, forgetting about his boss who was still battling with the other Konoha ninjas. "Hold on Kakashi, I'm coming." Asuma yelled and dropped onto the water's surface expertly. The water was not even rippling under him. He brought up his trench knives and murmured his next jutsu, Flying Swallow. The edges of his knives hummed with invisible wind chakra and it elongated, sharpened and overall put a foreboding feeling into Deku. The turban-wearing creation raised one hand and made seal-less water clones that didn't waste any time to dash at the other only wind user in Konoha besides his master, Naruto. The wind user clenched his teeth resolutely and slashed, hacked and stabbed mercilessly at the clones. Clones are well known to have less than a quarter of their summoner's strength, so it was understandable how over 20 water clones couldn't get into Asuma's guard fast enough to take him out. The long wind blade sliced them into ribbons and dispelled them as soon as they got into range. The Jounin was making progress to where the caster of the water clones was holding his comrade hostage, perspiration dripping from his hair, along with water that had exploded off the water clones. Deku stopped summoning clones and resolved to take potshots at Asuma with his stone stakes. The Dark One hoped his chakra battery had enough chakra stored up as a backup. Though cutting the strong rocks out of the air was easy enough, the projectiles were coming at Asuma faster and faster. He needed a distraction, and he needed it now. Sasuke answered his unsaid prayer with a massive demon wind shuriken. The last loyal Uchiha had grown tired of watching his teachers fight and had wanted to get in on the action, so against his better judgment and Shikamaru's frantic gestures for him to stand down, he pulled out the giant shuriken and hurled it at Deku. The weapon whistled in the air and time slowed down. Deku stopped his stone stake onslaught and fired a precise stake at the shuriken, breaking it into millions of pieces, and the wind user took the split-second opening professionally. He threw one of his trenched knives, still coated with wind chakra, at Deku. The Dark One hummed sourly and increased the chakra flow going to his legs, the water under him exploded upwards, and the lethal knife whistled past him. Kakashi escaped from his position, thanked Asuma quietly, and both Jounin took strong stances on the water as their opponent landed smoothly. He looked at both Jounin and began flashing through some hand seals. Kakashi, catching his breath, followed half a second later, and both went in sync, with Asuma flashing through his own hand seals. Wind release. Great breakthrough. Water release. Great waterfall technique. Water release. Great waterfall technique. It was the wind technique that attacked first, followed closely by Kakashi's water attack and then Deku's water attack. The wind technique smashed at Deku's water attack, weakening it, and Kakashi blew straight through it, ramming into the wide-eyed Deku. The dark creation regained his footing on the water fast and began another set of hand seals, feeling his body already tapping in on his battery store. The water wave that had crashed into him settled down so he could attack. High release. Fire Dragon Bullet. He droned his jutsu and began spitting fire bullets at the duo from where his mouth was supposed to be under his turban. How much chakra does this guy have? Kakashi exclaimed and ran lengthwise away from the exploding fire bullets. His fellow Jounin ran in the opposite direction, towards Deku. I don't know, but he won't last for long. Asuma used his lone trench knife and slapped the fire bullets away. He ran at Deku and slashed, but the creature stopped his jutsu and rolled away. The man kept slashing at him. Deku felt his battery store emptying until a wind blade nicked his arm. For the first time since his creation, Deku felt pain. The blade cut through the tube that supplied his left arm with chakra, but not deep enough to cut it off completely. He masked it well and kept stepping away from the continuous lethal slashes. In a burst of chakra, Deku stepped into Asuma's guard and kicked him back and punched Kakashi's chest when he erupted out of the water. His legs were shaking as he leveled a killing glare at the Konoha ninjas before he blurred into the dark forest. Kakashi and Asuma, who had recovered from the blows, sighed in relief. Asuma retrieved his other knife and staggered back to the joint Genin team. He looked at the other Jounin curiously. Kakashi. Thump, sensei. Naruto half-heartedly glared at the letter he had received a day after he had sent the Dark One to his mission. So, they did get past you, Deku, he sighed and closed his eyes. It was inevitable, you see your limit. He pumped more chakra into the X seal, so much so that it filled the cloth creation in wave and almost filled the battery seal. He neatly folded the letter and sealed it into an arm of his chair. He then tapped the seal on the right arm of his chair and it lifted off the ground, hovering under a tree in his special place, the same place he had been going to relax and where he had personally met with Hinata. He cut off the wind chakra so it touched down. He now understood why his X seal tingled without his loyal creation being around. It meant that Deku was suffering from chakra exhaustion and was in dire need of chakra to repair himself. The water clone that had delivered the letter looked barely alive and had dispelled after he had dropped the letter. The shadow clones that had been with him had even dispelled so they could transfer some of their chakra to their boss. There still weren't any clones to guard him, but Naruto didn't need them yet. He could hover to his special place before sunrise and study seals till sunset when he would hover back in the dark. Quite frankly, he was surprised that his seal creation stood up so well against two A-rank Jounin ninjas that had names in the bingo book and were both reputed in and out of the village for their skills. He was proud of his dark servant. He already began spinning plans in his head to increase Deku's skills. He unsealed an empty scroll and began scribbling the training regimes his creation would go through when it had fully recuperated. He sealed in some advanced water and an advanced ninjutsu into the scroll. The right arm of his wheelchair tingled 3 times. A minute later he spied 4 pairs of eyes, 3 pairs of eyes and a pair of dark glasses spying at him from a bush. He ignored them and kept writing until he finished, then he sealed the scroll back, mentally reminding himself to send it later, and leaned into his chair to observe the sun, which surprisingly enough, was setting. There was quiet in the circle of trees until Kiba shouted, "I don't know what you're freaking about, Hinata. He can't even walk." He stomped out of the bush to the calm blonde boy. "Kiba." The flustered girl scampered out as well and tried to yank the Inuzuka back, but he pulled his arm away from her and stopped a few feet away from Naruto. His Ninken, Akamaru, was beside him. Shino chose to be quieter. He briskly walked out and stopped beside Hinata. The girl was busy hiding behind Kiba. "Hey, Blondie, what's up with you?" He crossed his arms and waited for the sitting boy's reply. Naruto's expression was smooth, almost emotionless. He allowed his eyebrows to furrow slightly and an invisible smirk barely crinkled the corner of his lips. I don't know what you mean. I mean, what are you doing to mess with Hinata? Kiba growled and took an intimidating step forward. Naruto though wasn't in any way intimidating. He didn't move back. I've only met your teammate yesterday. I don't know how I could mess her up after one encounter. Aha. So you do admit you can mess her up? Naruto shrugged. Maybe. I'm not in the mood for your accusations. Please leave. Kiba pulled away from Hinata's grasp and walked directly to Naruto. He stopped in front of the boy and poked his forehead. Yeah. And what are you going to do about it? Kiba, I know what I'm doing, Shino, Kiba barked over his shoulder. He faced Naruto again and poked his forehead, eliciting no facial response from the cripple. So? What you gonna do, Blondie? I am warning you. He was cut off by another poke. Shino's hive was now buzzing loudly and the bug boy took a cautious step back, dragging Hinata with him. Akamaru knew something was amiss, he whimpered and hid behind Shino. Naruto grit his teeth and tapped a seal on the left arm of his chair. A dome of wind, starting from around Naruto and bursting outwards, repulsed Kiba away. Naruto tapped another seal on the arm of his wheelchair and a rope shot out from the arm, the rope wrapped tightly around the airborne Inuzuka's throat. Kiba clawed at the rope but found it futile and Naruto tapped the seal, so the rope slowly reeled him back. The boy was cursing, gurgling words and struggling against his throat restraint. He looked up at his captor and struggled all over again when Naruto unsealed a stick from an arm of his trusty wheelchair. Do you know what I'm going to do with this? Kiba whimpered and tried to pull away, but the rope held strong. Correct. I'm going to beat some sense into you. He brought the stick down on Kiba's head. The wooden weapon cracked against the boy's cranium and Naruto raised the stick up again. Apologize. Thwack. Apologize. Clack. Apologize. Thump. Apologize. For crying out loud, Kiba. Just apologize. Shino yelled, his hive on the verge of rebelling. Hinata was shakily standing behind him, looking surprised at how well the crippled boy defended himself. You should listen to their advice before I bring out my metal stick, Naruto said ominously, his face still a perfect pale slate and the wooden stick was raised for another strike. Kiba was rubbing his sore head and whimpering, struggling against the ropes. Last chance. Fine, the boy gurgled. He gnashed his teeth and spit some blood out of his mouth. Fine, I'm sorry. Now let me go. He was massaging his head and whimpered again when the stick was smashed on his head. Kiba screwed his eyes shut, whimpering and moaning pitifully as lights popped behind his eyelids. He could barely hear the cripple or anything for that matter. Say please. Please. Naruto tapped the seal in the rope as if it had a mind of its own, unwound from Kiba's neck and retracted back into his chair. He tapped another seal and another dome of air threw the boy away. Good. Now I don't want to see any of you here again. Leave. Now. Hinata ran to Kiba and helped him to his feet as the three genin ran out of the clearing. Before Hinata left she turned and sent a glance at Naruto, mouthing an apology at him, but Naruto wasn't looking, he was focusing on the setting sun. The girl tried to cover her disappointment and left with Kiba. Not too long later, a dozen Daku clones landed around him and fell on their knees. The one at the front spoke, "We are sorry for our late arrival, master. Don't worry about it, it was a nice exercise." He sealed his wooden stick. Any news? Yes, the Jounin and Konoha ninjas are still recovering from the fight and are training the genin in case the boss ever attacks again. I don't care what they do, as long as they don't go snooping into my business they can stay. I'm talking about Wave. The town hall has been fully restored and the daimyo's palace has been fortified, ready for you to come whenever you want. Work on the walls is underway. The boss has already placed the seals and he says it'll be finished in a few weeks. A barn has already been filled and the masses have been fed so rice prices are lower. The first ship has been finished and we are currently exporting half of the farm produce to Hidden Waterfall Village. They are still skeptical about our trading alliance, but they aren't putting up any sort of fuss. The head of that village has scheduled a meeting with the boss in 2 months, precisely over the day Konoha holds their Chunin exams, to see if there is any way to extend the alliance. The bridge is being built as we speak. Good. Naruto unsealed the letter he had written before and handed it to the speaking water clone. Take that to Daku and tell him to study it. The clone saluted and ran to Wave. Naruto pointed at a random clone. I want you to go to the forbidden section of the library and copy the security seal down if there is any, bring it back to me at my apartment so I can give you the counter seal and go back with 3 others to copy as many scrolls as possible, irrespective of what they are talking about. The clone saluted and ran off to the library. Naruto pointed at another clone. I'm hungry. Go and get me some ramen, the legal way. The clone bowed and went off to perform his duty. The rest of you are to escort me home. His security detail marched around him as he hovered over his apartment. It was dark, but the clone navigating his chair guided him to the right path. He allowed his loyal servants' clones to take him home as his mind wandered. He was thinking about a lot of things, how to incorporate Hinata into his master plan, how to prove Wave's faithfulness to the alliance to Hidden Waterfall, how to attract more alliances, what counter-seal he would have to come up with, among other things. All in all, he wouldn't be idle for a very long time. Time skip. 2 months later, Deku waltzed calmly to Wave Country's loading docks. He was wearing the maroon-colored robes of the leader of Wave Country, with a new symbol for Wave spread largely on the back, a circle with 4 wave lines inside it. Deku also wore dark black sunglasses that fully hid his red eyes. Under the robes, he was wearing his combat clothes. His eyes moved to the sailors who were loading the large ship with rice. Those who saw him bowed politely and went back to their work. Deku nodded to their greetings. He walked up the boardwalk of the ship and to the captain's quarters. He knocked on the door and entered when the person on the other side of the door shouted for him to enter. The ship's captain abruptly stood up from his desk chair and bowed low to Deku. "Lord Deku. Please, sir, have a seat." The Dark One sat down briskly in the chair and leaned back. "Are you here for the report?" "Yes. This is the 4th voyage to Waterfall Village, and I have seen the Prophet myself, but I want to see if there are any problems. Pirates. Pests. Scurvy. The only problem I can report about is that there was a minor leak in the ship, but it was patched up. The ship is clean, and the crew are screened for any prior diseases before they are allowed to board." Good. There were 3 ships in the Wave Country fleet. Their main functions were to export rice to Waterfall and import the Prophet and clothing materials from Waterfall back to Wave. Aside from the 3 merchant ships, there was also 1 ship Naruto had assigned to be made. It was made to bring in and take out tourists that were ever to come. So far, there were only some tourists from Waterfall, those that were curious about the growing country that had allied themselves with their village. It was a fledgling luxury cruise. Wave had come a long way since they were liberated 6 months ago. The walls had been constructed and the sealed defenses were so far impenetrable. Up to now, it had captured numerous Konoha ninjas that had come to spy on them. They were set free after being thoroughly warned, but the Hidden Leaf village was getting too persistent. Naruto had written a formal letter to the Hokage as the leader of Wave a day ago, requesting the Hokage to stop sending spies. Since then, there have been no more Konoha spies. There was a new ninja and civilian academy that was fully manned by Henja Daku clones. They did so not to intimidate the students. The clones were teaching what they had memorized from Konoha's libraries, all according to the students' level. There was a library that was fully stocked with all the memorized scrolls, as well as had a very secure forbidden section that held Naruto's custom seals and S-rank jutsu. There was a teacher's school for those that wanted to teach in the Ninja Academy, along with one for the Civilian Academy. They would release their first generation of ninjas in about a year. Wave wasn't in dire need of defense, Naruto's seals were reliably strong, but the growing country did need the money from missions. There were many farms dotted outside the wall. The seals behind the walls cast a dome around Wave that alarmed them if it was being breached by anyone unfamiliar that the seal had not been made to acknowledge. The region inside the walls was called Wave Central, and the region outside the walls was called Outer Wave. The residents that opted to stay outside of the wall, that is Wave Central, had keycards that were keyed to their blood. Meaning that if it was ever stolen by a foreigner, the backlash if it was ever used would be unpleasant. The residents were to slide the keycards over a small seal matrix on the wall, and the wall would ripple open, fusing jutsu, revealing the gatekeepers. The water life was still recovering, but presently catfish and prawns were swimming around, eating the plankton and kelp the fishers fed them. The fishers weren't allowed to fish for them yet, but Naruto predicted that in a few more months the fishing season could start. Deku nodded and left the room. He looked at the sun and mentally smirked when he noticed the tourist ship that was on its way to the loading dock. He stood back, half an hour later, when the ship docked. The boardwalk dropped a few feet in front of him, he spied his scheduled visitor coming down, and he opened his arms warmly. "Welcome to Wave Country, Lord Shibuki." The leader of Hidden Waterfall smiled at the other village leader and shook Daku's outstretched hand. "Thank you, Lord Daku. I hope your journey here was pleasant," Daku continued as he released Shibuki's hand. The man's 2 guards stood behind him protectively, and he spied a curious-looking girl peeking out from the man's back. Her mint green hair intrigued Daku, but he decided to refocus on his guest of honor. The service was excellent and the water was calm. "Thank you. I assume you wish to speak about our alliance. Our hotels are still under construction, but you are welcome to stay at the tower. Before we go, I would like to introduce you to some people, first." He ushered the girl behind him forward, saying, "This is Fu. We shall discuss more about her later. The next person is Samsato, head of the Hidden Fang village." Samsato wore a thick tan leather vest and pants with fur shoulder pads and a fur-lined hoodie. He wore thick tan boots that had noticeable fang-like blades jutting out of the top. The man scowled and stomped down, 2 Jounin Fang ninjas marching after him. "Welcome to Wave Country, Lord Samsato. Thank you for receiving me, Daku." The Hidden Fang leader grunted politely. Daku knew his type, the tough as nails on the outside and the soft as cotton candy on the inside. His suspicions were confirmed when the feral man smirked sharply at him. He took Daku's hand in a firm handshake. Daku turned back to Shibuki and calmly whispered, "I thought we agreed for only you to come." "Yes, we did, but I wish to bring up a matter with others allied to my village. Please do not be offended. On the contrary, if it aids in making my country strong, then the more the merrier." Shibuki bowed and continued his presentation. "Next is the leader of the village hidden in the marshes, Lady Rinsuke." The person to walk down was a woman in a knee-length light green battle kimono. The edges of the kimono were sewn with silver thread and the sleeves were also silver-lined. Her hair was tied in a messy bun with 2 chopsticks. There was a curious tattoo of a mongoose wrapped around her left arm from her shoulder to her wrist. It was curious because mongoose don't particularly reside in swampy environments. The woman sent Daku a finger-wiggling wave and slid down the board. Daku shook her hand, but the woman came in for a hug. After an awkward half-minute of indecisiveness, they settled on fist bumps. He waved behind her to the battle kimono wearing kunoichi guards, and they bowed respectfully in return. "Welcome to Wave Country, Lady Rinsuke. It's a pleasure to be here, Lady Daku." Next is the leader of the village hidden by the chill, Yumi Chow. The woman who stepped down was a slender woman with pale white skin that went well with her thick white parka. She wore a knee-length brown dress and underneath it were thigh-high brown socks with white furry boots on her feet. Her hair was a flowing blonde that reached past her heels. She glided down and presented her fingers for Daku to kiss, but the dark one took the hand and shook it firmly, eliciting a wince and a scowl from the woman. Her white fur-wearing guards stifled their laughter from behind their nose-long hoodies. "Welcome to my country, Lady Yumi." The woman sighed wistfully and clenched his hand firmly, making the dark one mentally smirk at the strength behind the hold. "Thank you oh so much, Daku." She smiled warmly, contrasting her rigid posture, and shoulder-checked the Daku as she walked past. Last but not the least is the leader of Hidden Smoke Village, Genzai Kitsuen Shinsamoka. The last village leader to walk out was a fair-skinned big-boned man who wore an open grey robe that greatly exposed his robust belly and red silk pants that had a rainbow-colored sash bolting it up. He had bandages wrapped around his forehead like he had an injury a while back, and in his mouth was a thick cigar. He had a fat nose and thin pink lips with pupilless black eyes. The man grinned widely, his cigar clenched between his teeth as he brought the dark one into a bone-crushing hug. His guards were 2 leanly muscled twin men who wore gas masks and helmets. "Welcome to Wave Country, Lord Kitsuen." Daku huffed, losing the breath he didn't need. He pried himself out of the man's warm hug and straightened his robe. Kitsuen breathed out some smoke, a thick cloud of it escaped his mouth and nose. "Wonderful to be here, Lord Daku." He boomed, clapping Daku's shoulder familiarly. The dark one's knees nearly buckled under the supposed friendly shoulder pad, though he did grunt and step away. "I'm glad. Now, if you all don't mind, let us proceed to the tower so you all can rest and we can start discussions tomorrow." The ship's crew were running around behind them, getting the large sea vessel ready for their next voyage. One of each guard went back to the ship to retrieve their respective village leaders' luggage, and the group proceeded to the place they would be staying at before they met the next day. Daku was honestly happy that the first building to be finished was the leader's mansion, which was the new and improved daimyo's palace. It was a 5-story house that he had made sure was made to Naruto's specific tastes. The wallpapers were soothing, and the paintings were calming. He had constructed a library in the village not too long after, so he didn't need to keep too many seals in the mansion. There were rooms set apart for special individuals who ever wanted to visit, and the hotels weren't available. There were also places the servants stayed at so the service would be fast. The whole place was divided up into the house helps lodgings, which were in a section of the west wing of the mansion, the visitors' lodgings which were in the east wing, the kitchen was a massive area in the west wing, and the wave leader's sleeping quarters and office was in the east wing. The additions to the east wing were a large living room, a dining room, a parlor, a children's section for those who needed constant supervision and, of course, a bar. Daku had assigned each village leader to their room and had already sent his master a message on what to do next. The reply didn't take too long to reach him. Water clones were fast runners when pumped with enough chakra. The next day found all the village leaders in Wave's town hall, in the meeting room. The table was rectangular with Daku sitting at the head, the leaders of Hidden Smoke and Chill to his right and Hidden Marsh and Waterfall to his left. There was a large map of the elemental nations on the table, with all the respective village leaders' villages highlighted. The talk started soon after they had exchanged pleasantries, with Shibuki speaking up, "With your permission, Daku, I would like to explain why I have brought these wonderful people with me to your country." Daku nodded for the man to proceed. "My village has a particularly unsavory history. This history tends to scare off potential allies, so if we are opportune to gain an ally, even if it's a trading alliance, then we are very cautious. It was Hidden Smoke that had first come to us, seeking military aid as well as with trading, and we agreed. Then came Hidden Chill with the same goal, and we also allied. Soon after Hidden Marsh and Hidden Fang came in and Waterfall was blessed with 4 alliances. He paused to look at the occupants of the room if they had any problem with what he had said. "Please continue, Lord Shibuki." Yumi, the leader of Hidden Chill, said airily. Waterfall was blessed with 4 beneficial alliances, and as an act of goodwill, I scheduled a meeting today to connect all the villages and the country Waterfall is allied with. I see no reason why smaller settlements can't stick together. He sat down after that. Kitsuan, the leader of Hidden Smoke, said, "I see the logic in what you are saying, Lord Shibuki. My village too has not had a good history, with all the explosions setting off randomly all those years ago. Tourism and trading have reduced until Shibuki was gracious enough to grant me and my people a trading alliance." Yumi coughed politely. "I believe all our villages haven't been seen in the most savory of light. Chill has been isolated because of an epidemic that struck us years ago when there weren't too many healers. It took the lives of our animals and some of our children. We tackled it a while ago, during my predecessor's era, and we are now free of it. Fang has also been struck with calamity. Our wolves went feral and killed a lot of people before help could arrive. Research has confirmed that it was a genjutsu after a wolf pup had been recovered and examined. We do not know who had cast it, but it reduced our populace. We are still struggling to regain our power. My father was too strong-headed to seek aid from our neighbors, but I wouldn't be that dim." Samsato grunted sourly. "Marsh, quite frankly, isn't a name that inspires people to visit. We also have a record number of floods every year. We have adapted to this and have thrived. We sought out a military alliance with Waterfall because some of the ninjas under my command could not adapt to fighting in our natural terrain. We sent them to Waterfall to train and Waterfall to send over their ninjas to get used to unfamiliar territory. Our villages have greatly developed from the association. And Wave has been suffering from abject poverty and corruption until it was liberated," Daku finished. It now dawned on all the village leaders except Shibuki, who wanted the meeting why they were all assembled. "You wish for all of our villages to come to a mutual agreement and ally ourselves with each other, yes?" He pointed at all the villages highlighted on the map individually, making it a lopsided hexagon. "I don't see why all our respective villages can't ally with each other." "I second that," Yumi said nonchalantly, though she had an undertone of an overly giddy schoolgirl. "I agree. It would benefit my village as well as all of yours," Samsato said. He too hid his excitement. Shibuki looked over at the younger leaders, satisfied with their eagerness to ally. "I as well agree." Kitsuan bellowed, not even trying to hide his joy with a massive grin plastered on his face. Why not?" Rinsuke said, leaning back and crossing her legs. "Then it's settled, the 6 of our settlements are to be fully allied. Let us iron out the details," Shibuki said, and Daku unsealed a large empty scroll. He spread it before him and brought out a brush and some ink from his sleeve. He froze momentarily and then slowly dropped the brush. "Is there a problem, Lord Daku?" "Yes, a minor one, depending on how you look at it. What I am about to tell you all is in strict confidence that you would keep it to yourselves, and also as an act of confidence, to foster a sense of camaraderie among our new alliance. I only ask that you understand." Rinsuke sat up and furrowed her eyebrows at the turbaned man. "Don't just keep us in suspense. You're free to speak." Daku rolled his shoulders. "I am not the true leader of Wave Country. This must be some kind of joke. If you're not the leader of this country, then why do all the people refer to you as Letter?" Samsato snorted. "This is difficult to explain, but I am the right hand of the true leader of Wave. He was the one who commanded me to liberate and take over this country. He is currently dealing with some things in his home village, but I was trusted to lead until he is ready to arrive. He was the one to plan everything out and the one who drew the specialized seals I am sure you saw during your stay. I am his enforcer and his protector. Let's say we believe you. Who is this true leader you speak about?" Kitsuan said, stone-faced, dead serious and ready if all hell broke loose. "His name is Uzumaki Naruto, and he is on his way here as we speak. He has a problem with movement, but I assure you he is not one to be taken lightly." There was a knock on the door and it was opened. On the other side was Uzumaki Naruto, sitting in his wheelchair and looking at each leader with steely blue eyes. He was being pushed by a Daku water clone, even though he didn't need to. "Welcome, master." "Him? He's just a kid. He can't even walk." Yumi sniffed dismissively. She stiffened when Daku took off his black sunglasses and shivered when he glared at her. His red stare dug into her soul and petrified her. "Stand down, Daku," Naruto said breezily and took control of his hovering wheelchair. Daku stood up from his seat, pushed it aside, and Naruto positioned his chair by the table. "Pardon my intrusion, honorable village leaders." The pale boy wore baggy pants, a gray shirt and a black shinobi vest. He coughed quietly into his hand and continued, "Those were the exact words a Konoha ninja said to me before he disappeared." Daku stood protectively behind him, like all the other village leaders' guards. Was that a threat? The woman stood up and glared down at him, and Naruto had to raise his hand for his dark half to calm down. I assure you it was not a threat, I was only reminding you of a core lesson being taught to all ninjas before and after they are out of the academy. Never underestimate the unknown. The woman sat down and crossed her arms. I wasn't meant to reveal my identity for a while, but I wanted to personally make sure Waterfall agreed to our complete alliance. Now I'm happy I came, my country is about to be allied with 4 more villages. The potential benefits my country, Wave, and all of yours would benefit from the alliance is too great. It was an act of confidence like my servant has said, and I trust you all to think logically before you throw away this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. He sure doesn't talk like a child, the hidden waterfall leader mused aloud. Could you please explain how you orchestrated the liberation and control of this village, Lord Naruto? I have no reason to hide that information. He then proceeded to tell the village leaders his breakthroughs in seal work and how he extracted part of his dark half instead of the Kyuubi. How he trained Deku till he was able to fight 2 A-rank Jounin ninjas for a while. He further proved his prowess in Fuinjutsu by standing up and walking around the room. Walking for too long takes a toll on me. That's why I prefer using my wheelchair. Simply amazing, Rinsuke whispered. And your wheelchair is without wheels because it is being fully powered by seals. Yes. It was one of my most recent works. I would gladly share what I can with you all if you so desire, but only if we come to an agreement concerning the alliance. Shibuki looked at the other leaders and then went back to Naruto. I think we can proceed with the alliance. But before we begin, tell me how you were able to get here without informing Konoha. Surely, they would ensure 24-hour security to their crippled Jinchuriki. I timed the transfer of watchers perfectly and swapped with a Deku clone. I then had to walk out of the gates till I was a few miles from Wave and then another Deku clone escorted me here. I assure you that the clone is very good at imitating me. Now with all that aside, let us outline the alliance. He picked up the brush and the alliance talks began. Naruto was not amused. Of all the days the Sandaime could use to remember about him, he chose the day of the Chunin exams and the day the village leaders came. When the seals the real Naruto had placed around his apartment had informed him that the Sandaime Hokage was about to knock on the door, he hastily swapped his hover wheelchair with one with wheels. It was rickety and old, to further emphasize how much he had been abandoned. He didn't even bother smiling at the man and had declined to go out for ramen when it was proposed. Quite frankly, he didn't have any part of him to care what the old man felt, it was exactly how the real Naruto would act. According to what the man was saying, the exams were still in the second stage, a survival exam that tested the candidate's ability to adapt in the forest of death. Why don't you show me what you can do with your seals, Naruto, the Kage said, looking over the boy's shoulder at the thick tome he was reading. It was an old scroll on growing vegetation that Naruto had read numerous times for the sole purpose of restoring Wave's ecosystem. It was so thoroughly used and consulted by Naruto that the words were beginning to fade. I'm not in the mood, Naruto said quietly. His eyes scanned the tome slowly. He was seated beside his window, where the mid-morning sun could wash over him. Now, can you tell me the real reason you're here? Hiruzen frowned. I'm here to visit my favorite knucklehead. He made an effort to smile, but it came off as a wince. He moved to ruffle Naruto's hair, but the boy didn't react in any way, making the man awkwardly drop his hand. The boy didn't even remove his eyes from his reading material. You haven't visited me in 7 years. What changed? I was busy. The blonde boy snorted. You were coincidentally not busy when I was kicked out of the orphanage. I was passing by, I wasn't busy then. I've read of ninjas that use clones to deliver messages. If you were too busy to come and see me, why didn't you send a clone? I wouldn't have known the difference. The old man didn't have any response to that. The silence that came weighed heavily on the man's conscience. I'm fine by myself, some nice Anbu have been helping me to buy clothes and food. They even helped me fix my leaky roof. I see Hiruzen tried to scramble for anything he could do to gain the boy's trust again. Let's go and buy that toy you've always wanted. I'm over it. Let's go and replace your wheelchair. I don't exactly go anywhere. Let's go and buy you some new clothes. Like I said before, I don't exactly go anywhere, was Naruto's sharp and cool response. He traced his fingers on a line and hummed. Why are you here again? This time the old Hokage didn't have anything to say, his shoulders slumped in defeat as he made his way to the door. I just came to visit. No. The real reason he was here was that due to the influx of foreigners in the village, he wanted to personally come to ensure Naruto's safety if other villagers ever got wind that he was a crippled Uzumaki Namikaze Jinchuriki. Visiting Naruto leisurely was more of a secondary reason. He opened the door and was about to step out, but he stopped and turned back to the inattentive boy. Let's go and watch the preliminary round of the exams, I still have an hour before I have to be there. He didn't give the boy a chance to respond, he walked over and pushed the wheelchair out of the apartment, frowning when the door locked by itself. Are you sure you don't want to show me what you can do with seals? Naruto was half paying much attention to where they were heading, he was still engrossed in the tome about vegetation. I'm still not in the mood. The Sandane pushed the wheelchair into a shop and bought a brand new wheelchair. Naruto stood up and limped to the new wheelchair without looking up from his tome. What do you say? Thank you, the boy absent-mindedly said, tracing another sentence in the tome and humming approvingly. Where are we going again? To the Chunin exams, the Hokage briskly answered as he wheeled Naruto out of the shop and straight to an access route to the Chunin exams arena that didn't pass through the forest of death. He wasn't sure what to think about Naruto. Naruto looked like he hadn't eaten or slept in a week. Naruto kept asking what was happening or where he was going. Naruto seemed too detached from reality to care about what happened to him. This wasn't the Naruto he had known 7 years ago, and he blamed himself for that. He had completely neglected the boy's well-being, even past the time when Naruto had come to his office himself, not to ask for money, but to be admitted into the ninja academy. The Hokage had been so lost in his musings that he didn't know when he had gotten to the exams arena. The Chunin hopeful were already bustling around in the room he was meant to address them. He assigned one of his Anbu to look over the Jinchuriki before he stepped forward and delivered his congratulatory speech to all that had survived the second test. He left the stage for the proctor of the exams, Gekko Hade, and walked back to Naruto who was infuriatingly still reading. He sighed and rolled the boy to the exclusive section of the spectators box, where only those who were members of each Kage's family could watch the exams. Since 3 of the Kazukija's children were attending the exams and the waterfall leader was busy elsewhere, he was the only person in the spacious booth. Naruto for the first time in a long time turned to the Kage and furrowed his eyebrows. Why the special treatment, Hokage? Hiruzen winced from the formality but summoned up a pained smile. You're special, Naruto. The blonde child shook his head and turned back to his tome. Is it because of the Kyuubi? He didn't need to look at the old man to know he was wide-eyed. I was bound to find out. Who told you? The Sandame's voice was steely and harsh. No one needed to tell me, I was given bad food and heard his voice. I thought it was a hallucination. You have to understand, Naruto, I did this for your own good. This time the man's voice was soft and friendly. I didn't hiss to protect you. Naruto rolled his eyes. A lot of good that did. Have you seen me? You can't deny the fact you haven't seen my scars. I didn't know it would be that bad. Well, now you do. So, what other grand secret about me do you know that was for my own good? The man's silence was proof enough that he was hiding something. He rolled through all the original Naruto ever wanted to know and stopped at the seemingly random one. My parents. The silence was palpable. It's for my own good, Naruto finished. Yes, I know. Like I'm a Jinchuriki and keeping that fact away from me was for my own good. Please tell me something I don't know. Naruto didn't have any respect for the Sandame, and so did the Daku clone. Your mother was a seal master from Whirlpool. I know that one or both of my parents were seal masters. I can't have a prestigious Fuinjutsu specialist clan, albeit an extinct clan, as a surname and not be connected to them somehow. Next. Your father was a very important man. I couldn't have been randomly picked from the orphanage to house the Kyuubi, Lord Hokage. From the way the history book described the fourth, he was an honorable man who couldn't do to others what he wouldn't do to himself. Factor in the fact I look too much like the fourth. Naruto, you mustn't say that sort of thing out loud, the walls have ears. Which proves that I'm somehow related to the fourth. Thank you, Lord Third. The old Hokage wisely chose to keep his mouth closed or the child would worm more S-rank secrets out of it. I'll come back after the exams to take you back home. I'll be waiting till you do, Naruto murmured, and Hiruzen walked to the Kage's booth to observe the Chunin exams, leaving Naruto to muse over the little bit of information he had learned. Apparently, Master's suspicions have been confirmed. He is related to 2 great seal masters. I have to tell Master. He was passively paying attention to the fights going on below him in the arena. Meanwhile, deep in a hidden section of the village hidden in leaves, a one-eyed old man stoically looked at the squad of root shinobi assembled before him. You all know your mission. Now, go. The faceless ninja swooped out of the hidden base, and Danzo went back to reading the status report concerning infiltrating Wave Country. Daku Shadow clone Naruto was currently at Naruto's special place. He had an average-sized sketchbook in his hand and a pencil in the other one. He was carefully drawing a butterfly fluttering in the wind, with tree leaves floating around it. He altered the picture somewhat by making the old trees bend ever so slightly towards the butterfly, like they were watching the tiny insect move. Drawing was one of the few hobbies the real Naruto had picked up to pass the time whenever he wasn't focused on his seal work or Wave Country. Imaginative drawing was also what he did. Fuinjutsu needed users to be imaginative, creative and innovative, especially when it came to creating new seals. The clone perfectly imitated the real Naruto by keeping his back straight and his face blank. He breathed in slowly so as not to guide his hand astray and breathed out quietly. The butterfly he had been drawing was long gone, he was drawing from memory. There were Daku water clones hiding around the clearing, keeping vigilant watch over him and his surroundings. The real Naruto had said that he would be back in a week or so, and that would mean he would have to be regularly replaced as Naruto throughout, so he didn't randomly poof away if, by some crazy chance, a stray weapon hit him. The Chunin exams he had been forced to attend 2 days ago were fairly uneventful, and he made sure to tell the Hokage that, with the only semi-exciting thing that happened was when the Kazukiya's son almost killing a leaf shinobi, Sai showing ninjutsu and taijutsu prowess no genin his age was meant to have, and Hinata and Niji's fight if you want to call it that. Naruto would call it a glorified failed execution. When he noticed that Niji's strikes were getting more and more fatal and Hinata was getting weaker and weaker, he was forced to remember that the pale-eyed, weak-hearted girl was an integral part of Naruto's plans, albeit a still unknown aspect of the plan. Naruto was forced to intervene. The minor fact that she kept glancing at him made him curious though. Hinata was on her knees, looking up at Niji pitifully, and raised no defense for his killing strike until the silver rope shot down from Naruto's spectator's box and wrapped tightly around Niji's neck. He had unsealed the rope from a scroll in his pocket. It was one of Naruto's best works. He had to have the real Daku steel magnifying lenses to peer at the rope and draw tiny custom-made seals on each thread of rope. The paintbrush was too large, and using only a hair from the brush would hinder his speed, so he had to resort to something he hadn't practiced often. He used his chakra. Chakra exercises were also emphasized in the Fuinjutsu scroll he had been given, and he had practiced leaf spinning and senbon balancing with his fingers. He had mastered the latter exercise but not the former. He went further and performed exercises for each element, with only water and air coming to him easier than the rest, so he correctly deduced he had those affinities. He was fairly okay with channeling and separating his chakra. So he used his water affinity chakra to draw custom seals on each thread of rope, intertwining it again, and thus his snake rope was created. Though he had to add in durability seals so it wouldn't snap, it was still a work of genius. The real snake rope was with the real Naruto, the one Naruto had was the prototype. It could only stretch as much as the chakra he added in, and he wanted to save his chakra for other things. He flicked his wrist and dragged the Hyuga back, rolling his eyes when the boy tried striking the ropes repeatedly. The proctor looked up at him with furrowed eyes and called the match in Niji's favor, disqualifying Hinata. The blonde boy shrugged and recalled his silver weapon, the rope uncoiling from around Niji's throat, releasing the purple-faced boy to fall to the ground, gasping for air. The other Jounin that had leapt down to save the girl was perplexed how a child that couldn't walk was able to save the Hyuga heirs faster than them. Hinata looked up at him with what he could call gratitude and a little bit of admiration. Niji was stoic, glaring at him before he walked out of the arena. Presently he was trying to make the drawing as realistic as possible, adding shadows, stray beams of light, intricate designs that would seldom be noticed, and even slight afterimages left by the butterfly's wings. He was happy with what he got. "Hey there, kid." Naruto stifled a groan when a pencil stroke skidded astray. He brought out an eraser and carefully rubbed out the mistake, making sure to acknowledge the person who had disturbed him without turning around. "Hello. Now is that a way to speak to me?" The man expected him to snap his head in his direction and maybe grovel at his feet, but Naruto was above doing that. The man that makes ladies swoon and men jealous. The great and gallant Jiraiya. "I speak to everyone this way, you are no different." He was still gently rubbing out the bothersome line that was disrupting his picture of tranquility. "Can you tell me what you want, Jiraiya?" He could practically feel the man's shoulders slump. "Old man Hokage told me you're a real whiz with seals. I try my best." "Why do you ask? Isn't it obvious?" "I, the gallant Jiraiya, the strongest of the 3 legendary Sannin, the Toad Summoner, the author of the best-selling book in all of the elemental nations, is here to give you some tips and maybe, just maybe, if you impress me enough, I'll take you on as my apprentice." He didn't get the response he wanted. Naruto was still busy cleaning off the line and trying to make as little mistakes as possible. "I can even add the Toad summoning contract. I am fine with where I am in Fuinjutsu, but thank you for coming, Lord Jiraiya." That was 2 bold-faced lies in the span of a sentence, on behalf of the real Naruto. "Oh, come on, kid. I'm here to help you." He walked to the boy's front and crossed his arms. "And I have acknowledged that, but I also said I am fine with where I am." He didn't drop the sketch pad to look at the man, he was tracing over where he had rubbed out. "Oh yeah? What level are you on now?" "Level 9, what?" "I'm on level 8.5. How did you get so far up?" "Years of study and nothing else but study. But I have been studying all my life." "No. The history books say you've been studying Fuinjutsu since you graduated from the academy. Factor in your unsavory hobbies, quite frankly you haven't done enough with your seal work." "Hey. I'll have you know my stories explain the intricacies of the female body, you should read it sometime," Jiraiya barked, opting to defend his novel series. "I tried reading it," the man perked up, "and I was sorely disappointed. 98% of the book is about sex, and I am not interested in that presently. But I would have to give it to you, it was very graphic." "That's good enough for me. Also, Jiraiya jabbed a thumb over his shoulder, can you tell me why two Hyuga are stalking you? The child didn't even flinch, which Jiraiya summarized because he already knew. I saved one, and I almost strangled the other during the exams. Naruto hummed. You can go back to the Hokage and tell him you weren't successful, Lord Jiraiya. The Toad Sage fully covered his surprise that he knew the old Hokage had sent him, though he did sigh sadly and asked, are you sure you don't want a toad summoning? I wouldn't need it, I can't walk well enough to fight, and I don't have anyone close enough to me to send messages to. It would be useless. The man nodded and left, his pride reduced somewhat that the child he didn't want to raise had already surpassed him. When Minato and Kushina had named him Naruto's godfather, he didn't think the two would die the next day. He didn't see when Naruto nodded to his back or when a black blur followed after him. Naruto then flicked his pencil-holding hand to where the two Hyuga were hiding, and two blurs dropped behind them and deposited them a few feet in front of Naruto before they could use their Byakugan to see who had ambushed them so quickly. Both Hyuga were far enough away from each other, so Naruto wasn't too afraid of separating a fight. Hinata, I thought I remember telling you and by extension your teammates to never come back here. Speaking of the shy Hyuga, he had been communicating with his boss's boss, and they now had a purpose for the girl. The real Naruto wasn't necessarily using her though, what he had in mind would benefit both Hinata and him, and by extension the rest of the new minor village country alliance. I know, Naruto, I just came to say thank you for saving me. She bowed and Naruto nodded, looking up from his drawing. It was no problem. He looked at Neji, who was unsurprisingly scowling at him. Now, why are you here, Neji? I came to see who you were. He scoffed, smirking. And I see that you're just a crippled waif that is fated to forever stay in that chair. Hinata gasped at his insult, fully expecting Naruto to retaliate, but was surprised when Naruto just nodded and stood up. I can stand, and I can walk. Maybe not well and not for long, but I can do that at least. He sat back in his chair. That's defying your so-called fate. He leaned back, relaxing. My seals help me walk. Neji crossed his arms. It doesn't change anything, you are still weak. There were two ways to go about answering that obvious taunt. He could ignore it and wave him away, or he could lash out with the arsenal of seals at his disposal. He chose the invisible third option. Taunt right back. If I was weak, how did I stop you from killing her yesterday? I wasn't ready. Next time, she wouldn't be so fortunate. I don't think so. Your unfounded animosity against a girl who literally couldn't hurt a fly is illogical, Neej. Go back home and get a life. Neji grit his teeth and clenched his fist. You have no right to say that. And you have no right to pick on a defenseless girl. Unless you get off on that sort of thing. Naruto waved his hand flippantly and sniffed. If you do then I advise you to go for therapy, it isn't healthy. He smirked minutely at Neji, knowing that the boy was just a few more insults away from pouncing on him. I have a valid reason for targeting Hinata, wheelchair boy. The Hyuga boy growled before he smirked proudly. Oh, very inventive, Neej. Smart play on my minor disability, Naruto said coolly. My question for you, Neji, is why are you still here? Or is it that you also get off on making fun of disabled boys too? Hinata stifled her laugh in her sleeve, a small giggle escaped her mouth, and she bit the cloth of her sleeve. Naruto briefly looked at her blankly then back at the object of his verbal attacks. The poor Hyuga was red-faced with steam coming out of his ears. I do not get off anything. Sure you don't, Naruto said with a roll of his eyes and another flippant hand gesture. You should go and train, I heard you were going to fight the Uchiha in the second round. That is true. I do not need to waste any more of my time conversing with uncouth riffraff like you and this weak excuse of a Hyuga. Good day. He raised his nose into the air and sauntered away from the two. And if you ever disrupt any of my fights again, I will end you. Whatever. Neji scowled briefly before he cleared his expression and walked off. Now, Hinata, why are you here again? Now under the figurative magnifying glass of the object of her affections, Hinata's face heated up. I. Spit it out, girl. I came to say thank you for. She stuttered out something incoherent and raised her voice, and to apologize for my teammate, his attitude was uncalled for. It was nothing. Naruto chose to fill in the blanks of what she was saying. She then nervously shuffled in front of him. Yes. How were you able to do that rope thing? The clone pursed his lips and contemplated lying to her or telling her to get lost, but then discarded it. If a Sannin knows he could do seals as well as the Hokage and more than half of the Anbu, then why couldn't he tell her? Fuinjutsu. She frowned in thought, slightly confused. It's mostly about using kanji to do things ninjutsu or any other kind of jutsu can and can't do. The boy lilted at his explanation, screwing his lips to the side and muttering, that's an extreme oversimplification of seals, but that's basically it. She nodded. Is that how you can walk, or how you beat Kiba? Naruto nodded. There was a long pause afterwards with Hinata biting the corner of her lips nervously. Naruto quietly groaned in frustration. Yes. Is that how you're so strong? The clone raised an eyebrow. I mean you're so confident and cool, and you're not scared of anything. You have only known me for about a month, Hinata. Her shoulders slumped. I know. He decided to humor her a bit. Fuinjutsu was my way of coping with loneliness and depression. The boy revealed this with an honest shrug, divulging a secret piece of his soul to the girl, knowing well that Hinata would never tell another soul. The girl listened with so much attention and focus that it brought a slight smile to Naruto's face. I got so deep into it that I found it truly fascinating. Seals tell me all sorts of stories, opening my eyes to a world and infinite possibilities where even someone like me can walk. You can say my devotion to seals and my ability to use them makes me strong. So to be strong I need to find something to be devoted to. She stepped back and bowed. Thank you, Naruto. For what? For your words. She turned to go, but Naruto stopped her. Hinata. She swiveled around sharply and answered a bit too loudly, yes. Do you really want to be strong? She nodded slowly. The clone then unsealed a wooden chair and motioned for her to sit on it. Let me help you. Besides, Konoha could always use a Hyuga Hokage as well as an addition to the new minor village country alliance. In Wave Country, inside the Wave Leader's office, all the minor village leaders were discussing how to strengthen their villages. They had talked about supplying money, resources and workers to Hidden Fang to construct a train station linking the village to Hidden Marsh and Hidden Chill, which was the furthest village. Hidden Waterfall was closest to Wave and Hidden Smoke, and Smoke was closest to Fang, which meant that if the train was fully constructed, then communication and transportation of people and resources would be much easier. Naruto brought forward 3 fully capable engineers in the Wave to aid in the construction of the tracks and the trains, as well as adding a highly powered Daku clone to help with lifting heavy items and lending Daku's experience in metal and woodwork. Kitsune had provided his best smoke release users to melt the iron and brought some of his best blacksmiths. Shibuki, Rinsuke and Yumi gladly provided money and supplies as they didn't have such experts readily at hand. Just as they were about to begin discussions on how to accelerate the ninja training in Wave, the doors to the office were thrown open and a hyperventilating demon brother was seen. What is the meaning of this? Samsado yelled in outrage. Humble apologies, honorable village leaders, but a group of unknown ninjas have just attempted to infiltrate the walls. The seals worked and they were repelled. How the seals protecting Wave worked was that every citizen's blood was keyed in, which meant that all newborns and deceased would have to register in and out periodically. To all visitors, temporary tattoos were stamped on their wrists, lasting only as long as they were to stay. Add in all the gates and gatekeepers to administer visitors painless tattoos, and Wave was very well protected against infiltration. What remained was to find a way to make the seals absorb enemy chakra and use it against them, like a virus. The seals create an active lightning force field and repulse those without these requirements, depending on how much the infiltrator used his chakra, so that Wave wouldn't be responsible for the death of a civilian who somehow got his tattoo rubbed out or a newborn child that had not been registered. Naruto planned on immersing himself in how to make the seals differentiate between civilians and shinobi, giving very harsh punishment to attacking shinobi and only pushing the civilians back. Have they been captured? Naruto asked calmly. He propped his head up with his right hand and was drumming his fingers on his wheelchair arm with his left. Well. The lone demon brother used a split second to look at Daku, who was standing guard behind the boy, then at the other village leaders' guards also behind them, in the same position. This boy must be the great master that Daku had been talking about. They are retreating to wherever they had come from. Haku is currently giving chase. What about Zabuza? Naruto asked, fully updated on the happenings in Wave and who exactly was under his employ. The other village leaders as well as their guards watched the interaction with mild interest. He is out on a mission with my brother, they are not due to return till tomorrow. The blonde boy rubbed his chin and thought before he said, even though Haku is a chunin and an expert hunter ninja, I still need those ninjas to be brought in. They've made me curious. Daku, I want you to personally go and assist Haku. Bring all the ninjas back alive. If you don't mind me interrupting, Lord Naruto, Kitsune said, cutting off the 12-year-old leader of Wave Country. Naruto paused and nodded for the large man to continue. I propose we each send a bodyguard after your intruders. Since we are now allied, a breach in your security becomes a breach in our security. That's right, Yumi added. I also believe it will foster a feeling of camaraderie if our ninjas learn to work with each other. All in favor? Naruto said and all the leaders raised their hands. Then it's agreed. Go after them and bring them back alive. The guard behind each village leader, Daku included, obeyed the command and marched out of the office. Haku, an ice release user, expertly crouched under a thrown shuriken and threw 3 ice senbon at the attacker. The plain-masked person threw a kunai and impressively intercepted the ice senbon. The ninja turned around and kept pelting into the forest with his team not too far in front of him. The ice user glared at the intruder behind his mask and was about to rocket after the ninja until he sharply turned around and held an ice senbon to the neck of a Rot-Ungasmisk wearing ninja. The ninja wore predominantly grey and black clothing. He had on a large black gown and flak jacket and plain grey undershirt and pants. He had a black dagger in a holster at his heel, a bit above his grey ninja sandals. The person raised his hand in a sign that he was on Haku's side, but the ice user didn't drop his guard. "Stand down, Haku." "Haku." The ice user released the senbon and allowed it to melt, shuffling back when Daku and 4 more curiously dressed ninjas ran from out of the forest. I do not mean to be rude, but what are they doing here? They were the bodyguards of the leaders, after all. The ninja from Hidden Fang, a female, spoke before the dark shadow could. Our leaders opted for us to join the hunt. She had waist-length frizzy brown hair and tanned skin with sharp facial features. Small canines stuck out of the side of her mouth. She wore a deep red flak jacket with white fang designs on its shoulders and sides. She had on ankle-length ninja pants and a long curved sword holstered at her side. She wore only a vest under her flak jacket, exposing her lean muscles and 3 fang tattoos on her left shoulder. "We best hurry. They are getting away," was the cool suggestion of the hidden chill bodyguard. He had short shocking white hair, wide eyebrows and chilly blue eyes that glared in the general direction of where the intruders had run. His voice sounded eerily like he was talking through a tube. His flak jacket was chilly blue, like his eyes, and he wore a plain white trench coat that barely reached the ground. He had on stark black ninja pants with curious-looking shuriken holstered on both sides of his hip. Aku mutely pointed at the Fang Kunoichi to track the intruders, and with a sharp howl, the woman leaped into the forest. The other ninjas followed suit. Back in Wave Central, the Fang Wolf companions howled in response to the call. Naruto looked at Sam Sato curiously, still in the meeting room discussing matters and making agreements. The man gave him a sharp smirk and said, "The hunt begins." The Fang ninja sniffed the air and flew through the trees, not touching the ground with her fleet steps bounding from tree to tree. The other ninjas sped behind her tirelessly. "How close are we, Billy?" the hidden Marsh Kunoichi asked from almost beside the Fang Kunoichi called Billy. She had short black hair that lay down neatly on her head with coal black eyes. She had a slim build, further accentuated by the green and black battle kimono she had on under a dark green gown and flak jacket. She had on short tight pants under her kimono that could barely be seen from the lengthwise slit on her right leg. "Here," Billy said lowly and burst through some trees, tackling a featureless shinobi and smashing him against a tree. She then bashed her head against the intruder's mask and watched with grim satisfaction as the ninja crumpled to the ground like a puppet with its strings cut, unconscious. Aku took out his opponent almost as easily, taking his time to watch how his opponent fought and realizing it was similar to the strong fist jutsu style. He slapped away 2 blows and gave his opponent a rising knee to the chin, shattering the mask. As his opponent was airborne, he shot his arm out and plucked a shuriken from the air. It targeted him and threw it back at the attacker, nailing the ninja's right leg. He thrust his hand forward again and pulled his opponent out of the air, smashing him into the ground and knocking him out with a finger poke to the neck. The hidden chill shinobi went through a short chain of hand seals. Water release. Water drill. The jutsu drove his opponent to the hidden smoke shinobi. Smoke release. Smoke blanket. The Gasmisk the ninja wore began pouring out thick inky smoke onto the helpless intruder. The featureless ninja began hacking into his hand, blood spurting out of his mouth, nose and ears. He slumped onto the ground a few seconds later with a swift neck chop, courtesy of the smoke release user. He accepted a fist bump from his tag team partner, the chill shinobi. The chill ninja bent down and tied up their captive, while the smoke stood and watched the other bodyguards handle their opponents. The waterfall shinobi was swiftly dodging sword strikes from his opponent, not having a sword of his own to counter, and defying all expectations that one of his large body mass could move so nimbly. He quickly analyzed the mysterious ninja's fighting style and applauded the lack of holes he saw in his offense. Though he did note that the person was a chunin, with the way he couldn't seem to increase his sword speed. He sidestepped another sword stroke and swung his right fist at the arm, snapping the elbow and making the stranger drop their sword. The person, despite having a broken arm, didn't let up with their attacks, throwing blow after blow at the man. "Your determination is admirable, comrade." He leaned back from a wide kick and snap-kicked the leg that stayed on the ground, shattering the ankle. The victim swayed unsteadily on his lone leg and gurgled in pain when the waterfall ninja grabbed his throat and ripped his mask off. The man, seeing the maniacal look in his eyes, thrust his hand into his mouth and grabbed his tongue. Billy Wolf whistled. "Kinky." The waterfall shinobi rolled his eyes. "He has a suicide seal on his tongue." He was trying to activate it. Haku, not having an opponent, threw a senbon to the mysterious ninja's neck and the ninja slumped into blissful unconsciousness. Meanwhile, the Marsh Kunoichi swept her opponent's feet from under her and axe-kicked her chest into the ground, forming a small crater. Oops, it seems I overdid it. She bent down and felt the ninja pulse, sighing in relief when she felt a faint beat. Relax. She's alive. Are you telling that to us or yourself? Was the snarky response from the chill shinobi. Whatever. She tied up her incapacitated opponent and lifted her onto her shoulders, the other bodyguards doing so as well. Let's head on back to Wave, Daku said and jumped into the tree line. Did anyone else see his fight? The rot unsmoked shinobi asked. I certainly didn't. Daku is very fast and very brutal. He knocked out his opponent and injured the one you were against, Smoke Shinobi, Haku supplied. The ninjas were bursting through the forest back home. Billy grunted. Sounds like a challenge. He beat an A rank missing ninja and held his own against Kakashi of the Sharingan and Asuma Sarutobi. The chill shinobi's eyes widened, breaking his cool expression. He fought Asuma Sarutobi and had a Kakashi, and he lived. His comrades were equally as shocked, even the brazenly strong Billy. How? They're both A rank. Daku seemed to be out of earshot, but instead, he ignored them and kept tree jumping. He fought them to a standstill, retreating only because of chakra exhaustion. I saw everything. The group silently kept tree hopping, looking at the quiet wave leader's bodyguard with a little more respect. Fighting to a standstill against two young A-rank shinobi was not something one heard every day. Add in the fact that both A-rank ninjas had special abilities and jutsu in their arsenal. Kakashi had his Sharingan and Asuma had his trench knives and his almost unmatched wind jutsu. It would take a terrible amount of shinobi experience and knowledge to be able to accomplish that. Something Naruto's dark shadow had and something that was still growing maturing. Curious, the marsh Kunoichi said to herself. Hard, sharp thuds could be heard in Naruto's special clearing near where teammate usually trained. A day later. The cool voice rang out over the noise. 1, thud, 2, thud, 3, thud, 4, whack. Again. 1. The thudding noises started afresh. If one was to spy on the cause it would greatly surprise anyone watching. The reason was that it was Hinata who was causing the loud noise. She was glaring bashfully at a training dummy, seal augmented not to break easily, her face red hot, and throwing gentle fist strikes at 4 major chakra points. This was meant to be a Hyuga secret, but Hinata surmised that a crippled boy could not do anything with the knowledge. She hoped. She bent down into a sloppy stance and thrust her hands out, index and middle finger leading, to the dummy's chest, then behind it to its kidney, then to its liver, and finally a sharp poke to its neck. It had been a day after talking with Naruto about how to get strong, and Naruto was seriously hoping his master wasn't wrong to place so much belief in the girl. Her stances were sloppy, her strikes were weak, she couldn't keep a straight face, the list goes on. The clone didn't want to train the young girl like the real Naruto had trained Daku, she would die of exhaustion, but he was seriously contemplating it. He gave up and chose to break his stoic look with a sharp frown. Tell me, Hinata, why are we here if you clearly aren't ready to make yourself better? Teammate was currently on a break until after the exams, meeting only for a 3-hour workout and light sparring before being dismissed. I do want to make myself better. She stood up straight and blushed furiously when she looked at the blonde clone. See what I mean? You cannot set your mind on one single activity. I'm not impressed. Those words sounded like funeral gongs in Hinata's ears. Her eyes widened and she looked at the clone, restraining herself from gasping too loudly. You have a lot of potential, but you are too soft. I can be hard. Are you telling me that or are you reassuring yourself? It makes me wonder what you have been doing with your team since you joined. Flexibility exercises can only take you so far. You need to toughen your strikes, you need to have a clear mind, you need to increase and improve your chakra reserves, you need proper nutrition, you need to up your speed, you need to up your strength, you need to up your confidence, you need a proper training schedule, you need to be focused. I am focused. The girl yelled, clenching her fist in anger at all the problems the boy had outlined just after spending half a day showing him what she got. The blonde clone had exposed most of everything she had wrong with her life, and she was angry. Not at him, but at herself, and she punctuated her drive by pointing a sharp finger to the ground and barking without a sliver of a stammer, I want this. I want to be here. I want to do this. She stomped the ground and said in a loud voice, I want to get better. Her outburst surprised the blonde clone, he leaned back a little and paused mid-speech, slack-jawed. Though he stood his ground that she needed to be disillusioned as much as possible, these realities and her responding outburst were good. The real Naruto believed in cold, hard truth. The girl's face was still red but not out of embarrassment. The clearing was quiet for a minute, the only sound being the chirping of birds in the distance, and Hinata's semi-enraged breathing. Listen, Naruto sat up straight and cleaned all expression off his face. I do not like wasting my time. The girl closed her eyes tightly and gritted her teeth, almost recoiling from hearing him deny her. I am going to give you one more chance to impress me with your skill, the skills you have, so I know where to start. Are you ready? She opened her eyes wide but still nodded frantically. Good. Now, let's start all over again. She swiveled around and took the basic stance of the gentle fist, glaring at the training dummy without her Byakugan activated. Her face was still red, but this was because she was still trying to get her heart under control. "I'm not going to count you in. Begin when you're ready." "Yes," she responded and slowed her heart rate down, reducing the dusting of red on her cheek to something barely visible. She thrust her right hand forward at the dummy's chest, burying her fingers in its chest, then she twirled around, her hand still in its chest, and jammed her fingers at where the kidneys were roughly located in an average human's body. She released the chest jab and pelted where the liver was and at the same time released the kidney strike to bury her chakra-laced fingers halfway through the dummy's throat. Hinata stood back to marvel at what she had done, gulping in ragged breaths through her grit teeth. The training dummy started slumping slowly, simulating the fact that it had been killed with her strikes. "I did that." She was brought out of her thoughts when she heard slow clapping from beside her. "Very good, Hinata. Much better than your first attempt. I'm very impressed by your determination." The girl refrained from ducking her head in embarrassment at the clone's praise. She had quickly learned that this boy didn't like seeing weakness in any form. So, she stood up straight, albeit madly blushing, and bowed slightly. "Thank you, Naruto. When I'm teaching you, you call me sensei." "Naruto-sensei," she corrected herself. Naruto nodded and made his chair hover around the clearing slowly. The girl made sure to keep her posture good and her eyes staring straight at the dead dummy. "Good, you're learning. We'll meet up here every day until the end of the exams. On that day, if you impress me enough, I'll continue with your training. Am I understood?" "Yes, Naruto-sensei. Now, let's work on your stamina first before we keep going." He hovered over her and, quick as a flash, tied her up with his snake rope, put weight seals on both her feet and hands, and released her. Something that happened so fast the girl was unsure it happened. "The seals I put on you are weight seals. With every pulse of chakra I send in from here," he tapped an arm on his wheelchair, and her hands and feet felt slightly heavier, "the weight will increase." He tapped it again, and her arms felt like they were about to tear out of her sockets. "Start jogging to and from your team's training ground here until I tell you to stop. We'll be doing this every day, 2 hours before sunrise, and immediately after your team training if you can call it that. Begin and remember. I have eyes everywhere." Hinata couldn't remember the last time she had carried so much weight at once. As she ran her legs shook from the strain and her hands, which she kept up to her sides, were burning from strain. Naruto was very impressed. She was currently using the seal at level 3, which meant she was lifting exactly 80 pounds, more than half her body weight, without uttering a word of complaint. That same day, Wave Country, you said there are suicide seals on their tongues. The real Naruto asked the waterfall shinobi that was behind Shibuki. The village leaders were currently walking down a subterranean passage under the wave leader's tower to where the root ninjas were being kept in a seal-induced stasis. He was hovering at the front with Samsato, walking briskly beside him with the other village leaders and their guards behind them. The passage could only fit 3 at a time. Yes. 2 of them have already activated it when they woke up ahead of schedule. That was why Deku had put them into stasis, so there wouldn't be any more loss. Now they had to work with the 3 remaining intruders. The village leaders all chose not to blame their bodyguards for the loss, since it was very unexpected that a ninja could force himself awake after being knocked unconscious. Even still the guards had profusely apologized for failing, Deku included. They then entered a wide stone-walled room that had 3 hospital-style beds inside. The room was well lit, making sure there weren't too many shadows, and the room was very cool, not painfully so though. The boy hovered over to the side of the bed at the far left of the room. The village leaders followed only to see what he was going to do. Naruto wore a pair of plastic gloves and looked at the root ninja on the bed that was stripped down to only his shirt and pants. The ninja had a softly glowing blue kanji for deep sleep plastered on his forehead. The ninja was taking low, slow breaths to show he was still very much alive. The blonde seal master stood up, Deku pulling his wheelchair back and gently pried the intruding ninja's mouth open. He snapped his fingers and Deku came over and held the mouth open. Naruto pulled out the tongue and hummed in thought at what he saw. Since the boy was the only resident seal master, he chose to speak to the leaders, not to keep them in the dark. He has a very complex seal on his tongue. He used his pinky finger to trace the seal. No, correction, there are 2 seal complexes on his tongue. Do? I thought it was only possible to have one, Rinsuke, the leader of Hidden Marsh wondered aloud. The other leaders nodded to show that they too were wondering the same thing. I thought the same thing too when I was at level 5. The scroll I learned from at the time showed me that it was possible to put even up to 100 seals together, as long as the seal master knows what he is doing. He bent down to look at the roof of the ninja's mouth, then under his tongue, finding nothing. I can believe that doing something like that has to have risks, Samsato said, agreeing with Naruto's lecture. Yes. The seal master has to combine kanji that are more compatible with the other, he has to be very careful with how he draws them, or it would blow up in his face. Still, the risks are always worth the rewards. Believe me. Are we to assume that you have used complex seals before? Shibuki asked. Numerous times, the seals that make my wheelchair move are complex, the seals that protect Wave are complex and might I add very hard to crack, the visitor's seals on your wrists are extremely complex, and the list goes on. The leaders watched as a kanji for find detect glowed on Naruto's palm. He moved it slowly over the unconscious ninja's body. This seal on my hand is made up of 4 seals. There were 2 types of complex seals, the ones that were stacked on top of each other and the ones that were tied end to end, similar to cursive handwriting. The seal on his palm was stacked on top of each other, melding together after he successfully channeled his chakra in to make his seal detection seal. Complex seals were not very easy to detect by people who haven't been exposed to the finer intricacies of Fuinjutsu or anyone below level 5 of mastery in Fuinjutsu. What seal complexes are on this ninja's tongue, Lord Naruto? Yumi asked, engrossed by how interesting seals could be and how deep the ninja art could go, much deeper than anything she had ever encountered. Note. A seal complex is a single, simple seal. A complex seal is a seal made up of more than one simple seal. Naruto appreciated the questions, it showed that they had a healthy respect for seals and were willing to learn what they could. He would gladly oblige them since Fuinjutsu wasn't a secret art. There are 3 simple seals on his tongue, combined expertly to make one complex seal. The first is the basic storage seal, tuned only to store fire chakra. Second is an archaic suicide seal, or cyanide seal, a seal I have only seen once and it was in an ancient scroll I learned from. The last seal is a rare kind of seal called the loyalty seal, it is like an oath never to speak about something. The seals combine to form the complex kanji for death by fire. The boy had detected storage seals on the ninja's forearms and trap seals on the ninja's chest. He turned off the detection seal on his palm and rummaged through the pockets of his baggy pants. He then removed a thin sheet of paper and snapped his fingers. Daku promptly dropped a brush on his master's awaiting hands and held out an inkpot for the boy to dip the brush in. What are you doing now, Naruto? Yumi asked, leaning in slightly to look at what the boy was drawing. I'm drawing a seal I created to tell me what exactly is inside a storage seal and, if I'm lucky, tell me what traps are in that seal. He pointed to the exposed chest of the unconscious ninja. Stand back, please. The leaders shuffled back 2 steps as the boy finished the seal with an expert flourish and wafted it over the storage seal twice. He then looked at the sheet of paper in his hand and pursed his lips. Nothing threatening so far. He only has the essentials every ninja has to have on a mission. Spare clothing, spare kunai and shuriken, an adachi, a spare mask, toiletries that seems to be about it. He tore the paper up and drew another one on another thin sheet of paper, waving it over the trap seal once this time. Daku stood ready to intercept any problem that arose. Just a highly powered explosive seal. It would probably detonate when I unseal it, it would probably take out a quarter of Wave. Storage seals and trap seals were eerily similar, the difference being that trap seals threw or detonated anything sealed inside, while storage seals only dropped whatever was inside. Fortunately for us, the person that drew these seals used outdated versions of each seal I mentioned. Naruto frowned, muttering with sarcasm dripping from his words, I'm almost offended by how outdated they are. Naruto waved for the leaders to calm down, showing them non-verbally that he had no intention of blowing them up sky high. Naruto checked the other ninjas' tongues and scanned their bodies, confirming that they too had the same seals on them. You said these people have secrecy seals on them, Yumi began, the most interested of the village leaders. Naruto acknowledged her question with a positive hum as he looked at the seals on the first ninja's tongue again. Is there any way to nullify it? Take apart the entire seal complex so we can find out just who sent them. The young blonde seal master didn't respond for a while, only nodding slowly to himself. He then opened his mouth and said, I can break the fire storage seal and the suicide seal, but I have only seen the loyalty seal once or twice before. The boy scratched his chin. I'll have to break the seals according to how they are stacked. He whipped out his brush and drew a clean X on the first ninja's tongue. He channeled his chakra to the seal and a small smash echoed from the broken seal. The fire storage seal is down. That quick? Samsato asked loudly. If I were a level 5 seal master, I would have needed a piece of paper or a scroll to draw out a seal to destroy the storage seal, but since I am well versed with drawing miniature seals, it isn't that hard. He could visibly see the respect they have for him increased exponentially. He turned back to the ninja and handed his brush back to Daku. He traced his pointer finger over the next seal, the suicide seal, and after doing so he made a quick slashing motion. His blue chakra is visible, shattering the seal. Second seal is down. The village leaders applauded quietly. The bodyguards too. Naruto smiled slightly at them and humored them by making a flourishing bow. For the last, and possibly the hardest and most dangerous seal to crack, Naruto had Daku widen the ninja's mouth a bit. He raised his pointer finger again and traced the seal on the tongue, and after finishing he began tracing the seal backwards. Tiny drops of perspiration appeared on his forehead. When he finished, he leaned back to marvel at what he had done, his blue chakra glowing over the loyalty seal, and the nefarious seal glowed a soft green. He took in a deep breath and began flashing through a long chain of hand seals, closing his eyes to remember the chain. His eyes snapped open after the last seal, and he said, Hidden Art. Fuinjutsu. First Universal Whirlpool Seal Breaker. The air around the ninja's tongue rippled, and then the loyalty seal's ink melted into a puddle on the unconscious ninja's neck. Naruto puffed out some air in relief. Third seal is down. Wonderful. Absolutely marvelous. Kitsune bellowed, clapping his hands boisterously. Naruto nodded. Now? He dabbed a handkerchief on his forehead, not yet tired enough to sit down. Who wants to interrogate him? I propose Kao interrogates him. He is well versed in interrogation techniques, Yumi piped up after a pause, indicating her second bodyguard, the one that hadn't been sent out to retrieve the intruders. She looked at her comrades for any objection, and when she heard none, she motioned for the chill shinobi to come forward. How are we going to wake him up? Rinsuke asked, still marveling at the ease the boy used to break the seals. To answer her question, Naruto simply reached to the intruding ninja and slapped him across the face, making the man's eyes snap open and a pained wheeze escape his mouth. What the? He's all yours, the wave leader said, stepping back to where his fellow village leaders were standing. Kao lazily slinked up to the lying ninja, who just so happened not to have any visible restraints, but still could not get off the bed. The interrogator stared down blankly at the ninja, who was still futilely struggling against restraints he could not see. What is your name? He went straight to the point. I'd rather die than tell you anything, the person snarled, he clicked his tongue and his eyes widened in horror. My seals have been removed so you can speak at your own free will. I shall ask again, what is your name? Suppressed memories began flooding the ninja's mind, how he had been taken from the orphanage, how he had been forced to do what he didn't want, kill who he didn't want. He clenched his eyes shut in a futile attempt at summoning the till-death loyalty he had for his master, but could find none. Nothing whatsoever. At that moment he began questioning whether or not he truly wanted to protect someone who had made him do all the heinous things he had done. Assassinating royal delegations from lightning and earth countries in Whirlpool, making both power-hungry countries think the humble village was looking for trouble and starting an uprising for world domination. Poisoning the Uzumaki water supply with slow-acting chakra-eating virus when he was an honored guest there, posing as a Konoha dignitary's child. At that time, he had just graduated from the Root program, top of his group, and it was the first mission his master had given him to prove his worth. His eyes opened when he heard a polite cough. Well. His master was a very powerful man, immensely so. He would not be surprised that after spewing out all the secrets he had on the man he would later be found dead in his cell. He wasn't even sure if his master was his master anymore. I don't remember my name, but my master calls me Rat. His eyes were still closed, hoping his captors believed him. Kao nodded slowly. Should I expect your full cooperation? A deep sigh escaped Rat, and he looked over his life, feeling for the first time as old as he was supposed to be. Maybe, if he told these people what he knew and hoped for the best, he would stay alive a little while longer. Just maybe. He nodded his head. Yes, I'll cooperate. Maybe that was why he had been given the name Rat, he would tell all he could to stay alive a little bit longer. Naruto cracked a small smirk, barely visible to anyone besides Deku, who was very much used to seeing his expressionless master express something minutely. He snapped his fingers, and Deku presented his wheelchair for him to sit down and sped down through the tunnel, returning with a scroll filled with the other village leaders' chairs. When all were comfortable, with the bodyguards positioned at the corners of the room and behind the leaders, the blonde leader of Wave motioned for Kao to begin the interrogation. Let us start from the beginning, Rat. Who sent you to infiltrate here? The day before the Chunin exams finals. Konoha. Hyuga Hiashi looked down at his daughters with a stoic expression. Both girls mirrored his expressions back to him perfectly. I want you two to spar. Neither of them broke expressions. He looked pointedly at his eldest daughter, Hinata, and visibly frowned, glaring down at her, expecting at least some perspiration to break out on her forehead. He was surprised when she stood tall under his judging gaze. Even still, he couldn't help but degrade her. As much as a lost cause you are Hinata, do not make a total fool of yourself. Since Hinata was now in a team he could only train his daughters once or 3 times a month, and beginning from a month ago his eldest daughter had become even more reclusive than normal. She woke up at 3 in the morning, as reported to him by her caretaker, and stalked out of the Hyuga compound with astonishing stealth, bypassing Chunin guards with years of experience. He had been told she wouldn't be seen or heard from again until her team met up for training 2 hours before midday. He had charged Ko to keep track of her after that, but whenever he saw her make a suspicious turn into a corner weird things would happen, like the last time she ducked into a blacksmith weapons store. He was immediately hit with vertigo from children rushing past him, some even pulling his hands in different directions. Another time a cart of watermelons had fallen on top of him, appearing out of nowhere. The Ashi began seriously doubting Ko, so he sent out another Hyuga branch member and was met with the same results. All the while Hinata would sneak back into the compound at about 8 p.m., dead tired and irritable. Goosebumps prickled his skin when he remembered what would happen if you woke up a cranky Hinata, witnessing it firsthand. He had to lay Ko off for a week from injuries to his private area. The worst part of it was that she didn't use gentle fist strikes to humble the man. A simple kick to the crotch and he was out of commission. Poor Ko. He mentally winced before he straightened up and glared down at his impassive daughter, spying from the corner of his eyes his youngest daughter, Hanabi, looking at her sister with blatant bewilderment. He was extremely partial to the girl. She had never been reprimanded or punished by him since the day she was born, and he would admit that she was spoiled. Hanabi then glared at her sister, who was now boredly pursing her lips. The little girl scowled. "Head into your stances." Both girls, as one, sharply turned away from each other and stepped back 2 paces before turning to look at each other. Both then, again as one, bent down into the basic stance of the Hyuga clan Taijutsu style, the gentle fist. "All goes. Begin." The man barked. Both of his daughters' Byakugan flared to life as they went through the required hand seals in sync. Byakugan. Byakugan. Hanabi frowned heavily when her all-seeing wide eyes didn't detect any slight tremor her sister usually had or any increase in heart rate. It was looking at an Araboy sleeping but at the same time looking at an Akamichi eating. A fact that confused her. She darted forward with a chakra palm for a strike to the belly, the usual way she ended her spars with her sister, but something astonishing happened. Hinata twisted away from the strike and, with almost blinding speed, blocked all the chakra points in Hanabi's striking hand. She was able to do so with her weight seals reduced to 40 pounds on each limb. It still slowed her down, but she would still admit that she was significantly faster than when she hadn't even begun using weight seals. The little girl flew past her after having her arm turned into a useless sausage and stared in shock at her sister. Hiashi too. Her eyes couldn't find any genjutsu on her and the only peculiar thing was the drawings on the back of her hands and at the top of her feet. Acting too slowly, Hinata reached forward and jabbed her attacking arms and shoulder, making her body sag, then jabbed her belly twice. Hanabi wobbled on her feet, her body feeling like it was dead already with only half of her upper body blocked off. Hinata waited for a retaliatory strike to come, but the little girl was still in shock, her mouth gaping at her useless arm. Then the strike seemed to rain down from the sky onto the younger girl. Before she knew it, she was a panting mess on the ground and Hinata was looking down at her with an empty stare. This enraged her. She began visibly straining to move her body, but it was to no avail. "Stand down, Hanabi," she won. Hiashi, for all he was worth, never thought he'd ever say those words. He warily eyed his eldest and impassive daughter. The girl bowed in respect for her opponent, who was foaming at the mouth and looked at him expectantly, which he wouldn't have caught if he wasn't an expert in reading miniature expressions. Her head tilted to him slightly and her lips quirked up a bit. "You may leave." "Yes, father." And she stalked out of the training ground, not even sparing her mad sister a glance. "Get back here and face me." She struggled bonelessly. "I wasn't ready." "Get back here." The Ashi refrained from looking amused. "Hanabi, that's enough. We are going to increase your training. Next time you will be ready." Meanwhile with Hinata, immediately after her clan compound was out of view, she pelted straight into training ground 8, then slipped through the trees to her blonde teacher's private place. "Sensei. Naruto-sensei." She fell on her face, panting like a racehorse before she got herself under control and stood up straight, her face as blank as when she was with her family, albeit a slight bit red-tinged. The boy in the wheelchair, the real Naruto, looked at her with mild curiosity. Yes, Hinata, he had arrived back in Konoha a week prior and was fully informed of what he had gotten himself into. "I finally beat her," she puffed out, her chest inflating with pride. "I finally beat my sister into jutsu." The blonde boy casually noticed that compliments did a lot of good to the girl's confidence, so he decided to oblige her, saying, "Well done, Hinata." Those few words did a world of things to the girl. She blushed heavily, she looked down, she poked a blade of grass with her foot, but she still stood up straight, remembering that her teacher preferred confidence, as little as she could give. The boy allowed her to have her moment of glory. "As a reward, you have no training for today and tomorrow. You will still have your weight seals active." On cue, she felt her body sag under the added weight of 90 pounds. "Now take a seat, I have something to tell you." The girl snapped out of her blush-induced daze and sat cross-legged on the ground looking up at him. "The first thing I want to tell you is that I have been receiving troubling news from my spies." Her eyes widened, not knowing that her semi-crippled teacher had spies. Sensei has spies, he's cooler than I thought. He gauged her reaction and when he didn't see any shift in loyalty from her pale eyes he continued, it seems 5 Konoha patrol stations in the north have been taken over by Hidden Sand and a new shinobi village known as Hidden Sound. She remained composed, surprised that the normally reclusive boy had told her even this much. I do not think this bodes well for Konoha, seeing how many shinobi there are. They are presently lying in wait until tomorrow, which I predict is when they will strike. An invasion, she murmured. Exactly. What do you want me to do, sensei? I want you to answer that question yourself, Hinata. She looked at the ground and furrowed her eyebrows in thought before she looked up and said, I will defend Konoha, since it is my responsibility as a shinobi. A ghost of a smile crossed Naruto's face, and she nodded resolutely, believing she had answered correctly. Yes, it is your responsibility, but you have to protect Konoha because it is your home. This is where all your friends and your comrades live, if Konoha is not present then you have no home. She nodded again, taking his teachings to heart. Listen to your superiors and make sure you lend a hand in helping out. If you survive tomorrow, then I shall reward you as well as bring you into my confidence. Now Hinata definitely had to survive the invasion. The person she looked up to, her idol, had put enough faith in her to train her, and now he was going to tell her more things, making her stronger. I won't let you down, sensei. I trust that you won't. The second thing I wish to ask you is about your ambition. She tilted her head to the side in question. What is your ambition, Hinata? To be as strong as you, sensei. Her response made the blonde seal master pause. I'm flattered by your response, but every teacher does not want his students or student, in your case to be as strong as him, he wants his students to be stronger than him. Greater than him. He allowed her some seconds to digest what he had just said. I want you to set your target in the sky and shoot for it, maybe even overshoot it. Now, I'll ask again, what is your ambition? Hinata again looked down and pursed her lips in thought, something she had unknowingly learned from Naruto, and thought deeply about her ambition. I don't want to say my ambition is to become a jounin. Naruto-sensei said he has seals and body traps that could level a battlefield if he wanted and take out numerous jounin. I don't want to say I want to become an A-rank ninja. If sensei were to become a ninja, he would be an A-rank ninja. Maybe higher. If I keep beating Hanabi in our spars, I will definitely become the clan head, but even that still seems too low. Then her eyes drifted to the side and she caught sight of the Hokage's monument. That's it. She looked at Naruto with fire in her eyes. I will become Hokage. Naruto graced her with a small smile. She met it with her own and he reached forward and ruffled her hair. That's the sky, Hinata. All you have to do is reach it. She beamed at him, preening under his hand. She swore to him with all the power in her being and with resolve ebbing from her pores. I'll make you proud, Naruto-sensei. Naruto's status as Kyuubi's Jinchuriki, as the beast called him, wasn't as secret as the Sandaime hoped. What was I expecting? That the Sandaime would finally pull through for something? That's laughable, and I know it, Naruto thought as he again used one of his silver snake ropes, having 3 in total, to grab a sand shinobi by his throat and throw another seal-augmented weapon at him, a silver chain, at the man's forehead. On contact, a seal warped to life on the man's temple, forming the complex kanji for deep sleep. All the supposed guards the Hokage had appointed had failed, blindsided by the snap ninjutsu and the sheer number of invaders. The seal master felt the barrier sphere around him tingle, and he, without looking, repeated his last action, adding the attacking sand shinobi to the countless sleeping shinobi around him. No blood was shed, he didn't like killing. Yet. His ex-seal tingled and Deku appeared before him on his right knee. Master Naruto, I want you to go and assist the others in fending off the invaders. Nodding in appreciation, Deku shot 2 wooden stacks behind him at 2 ninjas creeping toward them. Make sure you're not seen. There are not any Uchiha that can track you, and the Hyuga are too busy pushing out the snakes. If you see that the Kazekage is winning on the roof, lend a hand there as well. Am I understood? Yes, Master Naruto. He stood up and saluted his master sharply. Mind I ask what you will be doing, master? Here, Naruto allowed a ghost of a smile to cross his face. I'm going to stretch my legs. He flicked his eyes to the rampaging sand Jinchuriki in the arena. Deku nodded and blinked out of sight, not using any jutsu, just pure speed. Naruto slowly creaked to his feet and rolled his shoulders before he remembered something. He leaned down to his wheelchair and, with resolute finality on what he was about to do, tapped the right arm. On the far east side of Konoha, teams 8 and 10 were busy ushering in the civilians and academy students into an underground bunker. Hinata, with her face set in a light smile, assured the little girl and her mother that everything was going well. Her eyes widened exponentially when she felt her weight seals drop completely. Heavens, am I flying? She looked at both her hands and stamped her feet on the ground lightly to make sure her feet were still firmly on the ground. Naruto-sensei must have dropped the seals. I feel so light. Hinata, are you okay? Kiba Inuzuka asked her, looking on with a bewildered expression. She turned to him and grinned widely, doing so for the first time in a week or so, and laughed. I'm more than okay, Kiba. I feel great. Hinata Shino murmured tentatively as he watched her curiously. She lifted her hand in the air and let it drop, flapping her arms ridiculously, and then she began doing a weird equivalent of the toad dance. He was at least glad the civilians and the academy students were safely inside, so they wouldn't see the Hyuga heiress make a fool of herself. What has gotten into you? I feel so free, Shino. She did a handless backflip, twirling dexterously in the sky before she landed, and much to Shino's surprise, she didn't kick up any dust. Not that Kiba noticed though. Snap out of it, Hinata. This isn't the time to play around. Just then, the ground rocked with a massive explosion, throwing the team off balance. I don't know about you two, but I'm going to fight. You with me, Akamaru? Bark. The Abura mayor shrugged and looked at Hinata, frowning slightly when he didn't see any visible nerves, very much unlike the Hinata he knew, and she wasn't an illusion, his hive assured him that. Reflexively, he began to ask, you don't have to before he could finish his sentence, Hinata blurred out of sight, come, where'd she go? Kiba yelled. My hive says she went that way, to the center of the village. Shino started running after her, relying completely on his hive to track her since he couldn't see her. Kiba and his animal partner sped after the Aburam and chased Hinata. When they got to where Shino had lost track of the Hyuga heiress, Shino murmured to himself. Heavens, this was because before he and his male teammate lay the bodies of incapacitated sound shinobi. They had deep gouges groves on their chests, carving out their hearts or having their chests punched clean through. But did this the dog boy was fairly certain he knew how all the Jounin fought since a Chunin certainly couldn't wreak this much damage. Shino raised his pointer finger to eye level, and a bug landed on it weakly. He stared at it for half a minute before he responded, his tone quiet and amazed. It was Hinata. Meanwhile, Hinata was currently in a speeding frenzy that blurred past enemy shinobi, leaving those in her wake at death's door and blindsided by who got past them. She thrust her hands out and mistakenly punched through Sand Kunoichi's chest. Not disturbed by the bloodshed too much since technically she had killed someone before, a mysterious stranger who had wanted to kidnap her during a training session with Naruto. The boy had his back turned and the shadowy kidnapper landed noisily behind her. She acted before she could think, she threw her fist straight into the person's chest and watched with wide, horrified eyes as life left his eyes and blood pumped onto her hand. She had tried to keep her composure around Naruto after that to show that it didn't get to her, not noticing that the dead body of the kidnapper had melted into a puddle of water. Her Byakugan caught sight of a kunai training on her back and she rolled forward and lifted a sound shinobi so the weapon sliced through his lungs. She whirled around and glared at the team of sound shinobi that surrounded her. Looky her, boys, we've got a rebellious teen on our hands, the apparent leader sneered. You should have hidden. Maybe our master would have used your eyes. He wore the standard clothing for Chunin group leaders and had no distinguishing facial features. You want my eyes? She settled into a rigid solid gentle fist stance. Come and get them. Gladly. The man smirked cockily, commanding his squad, get her. Fully expecting the obvious genin to turn tail and run, but was surprised when she was the one to act first. She shoulder tackled one of his comrades with blazing speed and with a sharp uppercut, she shattered his jaw. Hinata winced. Oops, who's next? Now the rest of the sound team were hesitant. The supposed little girl had taken down a Chunin of average strength in 5 seconds flat. They cowardly wavered in place, nervously looking at their leader. We've got the numbers advantage, you idiots. His angered shout seemed to bolster what little bravery they had. They slipped out their kunai and dived into their opponent. Seeing this, Hinata, using her Byakugan, snorted at how slow they seemed to be going. She poked a man's ribs with a chakra-laced finger which made the victim fall onto another opponent, screaming in agony at the small prod. Her all-seeing eyes confirmed that she had broken his rib and punctured his lung with a rib in that one strike. She blazed her hands over another enemy and the man crumpled bonelessly to the ground. The Hyuga then did a flawless spin to dodge a wave of shuriken, plucking 2 out of the sky and nailing 2 sound Chunin on their foreheads. She barreled into a Chunin and jabbed his chest twice, ducked a sloppy and tired right hook and jabbed his chest again. The man wheezed and tried another right hook, but this one failed as much as the first one. She stepped aside and snap-kicked the man across his face, bursting an eyeball. Whoopsie, she cringed again, nearly remorseful for not knowing how to hold back her strength. Her all-seeing eyes forewarned her about the imminent danger of a barrage of earth release. Mudball landslide sent to her courtesy of the last remaining Chunin invader, the leader of the dead group. She glared at him. You killed all my men. He snarled furiously, powering through another set of hand seals. Earth release. Heat-seeking rock balls. The ground around him gurgled and began spitting out fist-sized rocks at the girl. She dove out of the way from a massive wave and was subsequently thrown away from the resulting explosion. It wasn't the largest she had seen, but still, she wasn't expecting it. Stay still. Hinata refrained from slapping the attacking balls away as she could with the tiny object still going a bit too slow for her. She neatly caught a ball, not applying much pressure so as not to trigger an explosion, and blurred to her attacker, ramming the exploding ball down his hysterically open mouth and covering her face with her sleeve as the man's head exploded. She stuck her tongue out in quiet distaste. Gross. She looked around her and nodded when she saw that no trouble was approaching. Where do I go now? Just then a deep beastly bellow came from the Chunin exams arena. There. And with that, she blurred out of sight again. Naruto didn't expect to be having this much fun fighting a sand monster. The boy ran at low Chunin speed, which was as fast as he could go, away from aggressive sand spikes being shot at him by the Mad One-Tails Jinchuriki. You're enjoying yourself too much, Naruto Kyuubi rumbled from deep inside Naruto's seal, amused by his brother's attempts at staking his holder. Naruto was glad now that he had listened to the Nine Tails to study Fuinjutsu. He raised his forearm, and a hazy blue rectangular shield spiraled out of a seal on that arm, blocking the sand spikes attacking him effectively, think something like a Roman shield. He dug his feet into the ground when the intensity increased and stuck his hand into a pocket in his baggy pants, bringing out a sheet of paper with a complex seal drawn on it. He threw the sheet of paper like a shuriken and watched with grim satisfaction as a subsequent inferno turned the sand covering the Kazukiya's sun, half turned to glass. The boy began to wonder about the true loyalty Konoha ninja had, since more than half of the shinobi populace ran over to protect the Sandaime, knowing the man was still fully capable of defending himself, instead of trying to stop the walking natural disaster that was Shukaku and its Jinchuriki. Though Naruto was glad for their absence, he didn't want any ninja or civilian to see him fighting except his opponents. The first problem he encountered was the Uchiha survivor, Sasuke, who was doing fairly well against the sand monster. Naruto knocked the boy out into a deep sleep. Silver chain tapped to the back of his head before he could react. Gaara's siblings watched in awe as the boy they knew they saw sitting in a wheelchair not 30 minutes ago held his own against the terror of hidden sand. They were beginning to waver in the direct command Gaara had given them to not get in his way. Naruto wore a dark blue and black long-sleeved shirt that was still neat despite all the sand he had to battle through, with black baggy pants. He flew through 3 hand seals. Ninja art. Fuinjutsu. Child of paper chaos. Sheets of paper flew out of his sleeves immediately after the last hand seal and exploded all over the Gaara, who was almost in his full Sand Tanuki form. I will have your blood. Gaara yelled with crazed eyes, pumping a staggering amount of chakra into his glass limbs to shatter them. He cackled madly and did something Naruto did not expect. He fell asleep. Shukaku is back, baby. Woo. The sand monster formed out of the gooey sand around the sleeping boy and threw his arms in the air in celebration. He looked down at Naruto, who was glaring up at him. Oh ho. So you're the bug trying to kill me. He swung his arm to Naruto, creating a deep groove wherever it passed, forcing the Seal Master to run lengthwise away from it. Run, little rat. Run. The boy ran up and wall and glued himself in place. His mind was a whirlwind of ideas on how to take down the beast. Naruto-sensei. Hinata. He turned in confusion to his only student as she called, forgetting his opponent. Shukaku capitalized on this by throwing his arm at Naruto, who was only fast enough to create his rectangular blue shield to take the brunt of the attack. He was thrown across the arena straight into a wall. Dust exploded in his wake. Sensei. Hinata cried in horror, not expecting her sensei to get blindsided. Shukaku yelled in triumph and took his time to celebrate. The semi-crippled boy coughed and waved away the dust in the air from his face. The dust blew away slowly to reveal the Fuinjutsu master encased in a softly glowing blue ball embedded in the wall. Ought to love seals, he mumbled and deactivated the protective blue shell casing around him so he could land on the ground. You're a stubborn little shit, you know that right? The Sand Tanuki growled and threw his hands to Naruto. Wind release. Sand scattering bullets. The intensity of the sand-based attacks increased and pelted down on Naruto, who activated his arm shield to deflect them. He again threw an exploding seal paper shuriken at the monster and used the beast's frustrated cry to run to his shocked student. What are you doing here? He asked coolly, throwing 3 more paper infernos at Shukaku. I came to see how I could help, she murmured, still shaken up at nearly watching her idol's demise. Her eyes trained on Temari and Kankuro, who were on the other side of the arena, ready to help when necessary. Naruto silently contemplated how she could help. He threw 3 more exploding paper shuriken, turning the beast's body almost completely to glass. I need you to distract the sand beast while I get close to that boy at its forehead. He pointed at Gaara. Her knees shook slightly in fear. I don't know if I can do it. I saw how fast you can run and how hard you can hit. He didn't obviously since he was busy fighting Gaara, but he correctly assumed the weight seals being down would bring those results. You'll be fine. He patted her shoulder to reassure her. Before the girl could respond, he spun around to his main opponent and sped over to it. His fingers flashed through a set of hand seals. High release. Great fireball technique. The arm that had been coming down in a merciless axe chop immediately turned to glass. Hinata snapped out of her daze and sped to the sand monster. Her jutsu followed her teacher's, exhaling from her mouth. Wind release. Great breakthrough. She was fairly inexperienced with the jutsu, seeing as wind funneled out of her mouth in a straight line to Shukaku, slicing off its other sand arm. Naruto had only introduced her to using ninjutsu a week ago, beating into her head the fact that her taijutsu alone would not be enough to survive as a ninja. Her affinity, strangely enough, was water, but she was more comfortable with wind jutsu, though she only knew one ninjutsu. Naruto had promised to teach her more wind and water ninjutsu. She powered through the seals again and cut off half of the sand monster's face, almost grazing Gaara, making the beast more enraged and forget Naruto in its wrathful delirium. High release. Great fireball technique. Wind release. Great breakthrough. Both attacks met at the center, and the wind jutsu cut through the fire, coming out with a blistering hot gas spike that nailed Shukaku in his chest. The result was instantaneous. Glass began cracking and webbing from his chest to his arms, to where his feet were supposed to be. Naruto used its hysterical panic to run up its torso, clinging on with his chakra. When he got to Gaara, he pulled his hand back and gave the sleeping boy a sharp slap. Whack. A sound reverted around the arena and silence fell around. Nobody inside the arena dared breathe. He slapped him, Temari murmured, her knees feeling weak. Kankuro only nodded dumbly. Their younger brother's eyes flared open and the sand monster's body crumbled to the ground. Naruto grabbed the boy by his arm and leapt away, saving the sleepy boy from the glass shards under them. He dropped the boy by a wall and slumped down to the ground for a breather. Hinata knelt beside him with furrowed eyebrows and asked the nonverbal question, to which he answered, "I'm fine. Just a bit tired." He waved her concerns away, his shield warped to life, and he held it to Gaara's neck as the boy tried to slink away, doing so without looking away from the arriving sand siblings. Who are you?" Gaara said in a quiet trembling voice. He dared not shift or the shield's edge would cut into his neck. "You may call me Naruto," he said to Gaara in a light tone, sitting up and warning Temari and Kankuro as they approached, "Not a step closer or you'll lose a brother." Gaara's older siblings both held up their hands to show they weren't going to try anything. "I can see those strings, puppet master. Don't even think about it," he warned again and pressed his shield closer to the one-tailed Jinchuriki neck. A thin bloody line formed under, showing them that the shield made out of a complex seal was truly sharp. Temari glared at her direct younger brother and Kankuro, and the two took a cautious half-step back, further assuring Naruto that they weren't going to try anything. "Now, give me one reason not to kill all of you. Right here, right now." Naruto stood up and Hinata stood protectively behind him, glaring icily at the pair. When both fumbled for words and couldn't answer, he shrugged nonchalantly. "I thought so." He raised his hand a bit and before he could plunge it through Gaara's neck, Kankuro yelled. "Wait." Naruto raised a curious eyebrow. We have information. Just let's not do anything rash." Naruto cocked his head to the side curiously, looking so innocent Temari would have swooned if her brother wasn't literally under the knife. He asked, "What kind of information?" "The reasons we're invading kind of information." He ignored his sister when she looked sharply at him. Naruto nodded for him to continue. "Orochimaru of the Sannin somehow convinced our father, the Kazekage, that Konoha was the enemy and by invading here, we would expand sand and make it wealthier. He didn't want to listen to reason. That's enough for me." Naruto pulled his shield away from Gaara and stepped back, allowing his siblings to worry over him. "Your brother and sister care for you, Sand Shinobi. Releasing confidential information just so they can keep you alive. Now that is love." He turned around to go. "How are you strong?" Gaara asked loudly, losing the last bits of self-restraint at how helpless he had been at Naruto's hands. Temari and Kankuro weren't able to settle Gaara down as the Reed shouted. "You're a cripple. How are you so strong?" "I'm strong because I have something worth living for," Naruto answered, referring to Wave Country and all that, unknowingly, depended on him inside and out, Hinata wholly included. The seal on his belly tingled and he looked up to the ceiling, sensing the fight above. He waved for Hinata to go and help secure the borders. "Next time, Sand Shinobi, use your strength before you use another's." "That's what I did." He ran out of the arena just as the meaning of what he said dawned on them. "He has a tailed beast," Kankuro mumbled. "And he didn't use it," Temari finished. Gaara looked at his siblings and his shoulders sagged from stress, years of pain and heartbreak. "Temari, Kankuro, I'm sorry. Maybe if you learn to love them again, he could be as strong as that blonde boy. Love them even more than they loved him." Just as Deku left Naruto, the roof, Naruto's dark half hummed to himself as he observed the barrier seals summoned by the Sound 4. He poked it and pulled his hand back when it disintegrated his hand. His hand began reforming immediately after. He wasn't the only one trying to gain entry into the seal, the third Zanbu guards were also trying. The Sandaime was locked inside the seal against Orochimaru of the Sannin. At the moment Orochimaru was making a rather long monologue on how Hiruzen had made a mistake in not appointing him the Hokage and that he was going to destroy the leaf since he couldn't have it for himself. Deku rolled his red eyes and ran through his limited knowledge of seals. Unfortunately, he couldn't think of any way to counter a 4-point barrier seal, which was much stronger than a simple barrier seal. He cast a powerful transformation on himself, making himself look like a generic Anbu shinobi, and walked briskly to one of the points on the barrier. He scratched his chin before pulling his hand back, forming a stone stake, and fired directly at Jirobo's feet, throwing off his concentration and allowing Deku to slide inside much faster than the other ninja. "Another one of your toys, Orochimaru." Hiruzen snarled as he turned to the mysterious Deku. Orochimaru paused in his rant and looked as well, bewildered and curious. "Who are you?" "I am here to assist you, Lord Third," Deku responded and, not one for theatrics, shoulder tackled Orochimaru to the ground, stabbing him clean through the head with a stone stake and humming sourly when the man melted into a mud puddle. "You're fast, I'll give you that," Orochimaru hissed from behind Deku, bringing his leg down for a skull-shattering axe kick, but the stranger turned around much faster than he anticipated and crossed his arms, taking the full brunt of the legendary Snake Sannin kick with his wood, stone and seal-augmented arms. Not even wincing when his arm broke, he swept his feet under Orochimaru, expecting the man to leap over it, and used the split second the man was airborne to snap his broken arms back together. "Durable too. Are you sure you don't want to join my ranks? There's always a place for one of your skills." The man landed in front of the stranger and smirked. Aku didn't deem the man an answer, he honed his arms at the snake summoner and began shooting at him. The pale man regurgitated his grass cutter sword and began hacking away at the annoying wood missiles. His head caved inside his shoulders from a smash from the third Hokage's adamantium bow staff. He again melted into a puddle of mud, his sword as well. 2 against 1 is hardly fair. "Let me even the odds," the Snake Sannin said from behind the third, making the elder Sarutobi swing his legs behind him and watch as Orochimaru slinked back like a snake, going through a set of hand seals. Summoning. Impure World Reincarnation, he hissed the name of the jutsu as he finished the seals and 3 wooden coffins shot out of the ground beside him. The lids popped off and Hiruzen gasped in horror. "You have gone too far, Orochimaru." The pale man snarled in response, "You forced me down this path. It's only fitting that you die by your predecessors." One by one the occupants of the coffins walked out. "Hiruzen. Man, you got old." Hashirama exclaimed. Aburama, the more reserved of the two, looked around. "We are not supposed to be alive. My jutsu has been perfected." He looked to his left and snorted when he saw a pile of ash on the ground. Not too perfect it seems. Using their distraction, Orochimaru jammed seal kunai at the back of their necks, making their eyes glaze over. "Kill your student and that other person." Orochimaru didn't count on the fact that the corpses Orochimaru reanimated weren't at full strength. Aku split himself into 4 and blurred over to Hashirama, while the second Hokage, Tobirama, ran to his student. The fight between the first Hokage and Naruto's loyal shadow was like looking at the sun reflecting off a kunai, with the speed both shinobi were using to trade blows, blocks and counters, most would say it would be enough to generate power. Hashirama drilled punches into Daku's head and the dark shadow raised his forearms to catch all of the blows, fixing them up immediately after and catching the wood-style user's fist mid-flight and roughly pulling it out of his socket. He didn't stop, he sent over a brain-bashing heel kick to the dead man's cheek, then another one, driving the man back and dazing him slightly. Hashirama caught a leg before it could reach his face again, but didn't count on Daku's clones, sending chakra-powered punches to his face and ribs. The 4 Daku clones didn't give Hashirama an inch of breathing space. If he were alive, Hashirama knew he would have been in a world of pain. The clones worked in tandem to physically break down the Hokage's defense, not slowing him down though. The dead man blinked in shock when the stranger's hands turned to sharp stone stakes, firing them between his eyes and driving him back even more. Aku silently ran up to the dizzy man and had his knee meet the dead Hokage's chin in a jarring rising knee kick, taking the man into the air. The clones capitalized on this by leaping up as well and shoving him into the barrier. Ending the fight as Hashirama disintegrated into fine ash. Hiruzen seemed to be having the same idea. He bent away from some water release, drilling water bullets and smashed his teacher's chin with his unbreakable iron staff. He grunted in pain when Orochimaru slid up behind him and plunged his sword through his spine and out his belly. "I win sensei," Orochimaru gloated, not seeing how the Daku clones threw the Nidaime into the barrier as well, destroying him and releasing his soul back to the afterlife. Blood dripped out of Sandaime's mouth and ears as the lethal toxins in the grass cutter leaked into his system through his spine. His eyes felt much too heavy to be kept open. His breathing got heavier and he tried to slow down his heart rate to slow down the rampaging poisons. "I sensei just die," was the soothing hiss from one of his failures, his student. A rough hand grabbed the Sannin by the neck and threw him away, still holding his sword. The man expertly fastened himself to the ground a few yards away and scowled at Deku before he smiled pleasantly. There is nothing you can do to save him, stranger. His immune system is too frail to fight my poisons. He will die today. Deku gently lays the old Hokage on the ground, still keeping his eyes on Orochimaru. Sadly, I will not see him die myself. He swallowed his sword and whistled for his sound force to drop the barrier. When you are ready to join me, all you have to do is call. He then melted into a muddy goo on the ground and the sound force flickered out of sight via body flickers. Konoha. Naruto was in the middle of training Hinata on how to control her speed and strength whenever her weight seals were completely down when Jiraiya entered the clearing. The Toad Sage curiously looked at Hinata, who was going through the kata for the gentle fist painfully slow. She was barefooted, standing on a bed of sharp needles. He noted that she was not wearing her usual purple jacket, she was now wearing a tight black shirt that stopped midriff and dark blue ninja pants. He wasn't aware of the fact that she had tightly wrapped chest bindings under her shirt to make sure that her budding breasts didn't throw off her center of gravity. He did see that her arms to her fingers and her stomach were wrapped up in bandages, probably from intense Tenketsu training. It was a month after the Chunin exams, and Konoha was still mourning the death of the third Hokage. What Orochimaru had said came to reality, the old man's fragile immune system couldn't handle the caliber of toxins in his body. Jiraiya was at least glad that the man died peacefully. The girl, who had long since noticed his presence, kept going with her training. She slowly pushed her palms forward, then carefully brought them back, then lifted her right leg forward and spun on her left in a passably executed roundhouse kick, something that was not in the gentle fist jutsu style. The man furrowed his eyebrow at that, then frowned thoughtfully, wondering when Naruto had started training the girl, as the boy's vacant wheelchair was under a tree, along with Hinata's purple coat folded neatly on the seat. He had deduced Naruto was training her because he had watched how Kurenai trained her team. This was much harder, and he knew as a fact that the Hyuga heiress would not purposely put herself through this. Where is Naruto? He asked. The girl slowly stretched her body, with her right foot still on a senbon, and pointed to her left. Thank you. Hinata went back to her training. Jiraiya, choosing for once to be serious, entered a small thicket of trees into a significantly smaller clearing to find Naruto relaxing on a tree branch, looking down at a young girl, probably 8 years old, with brown hair. She had on simple clothes, brown shorts, a black shirt, and no shoes. The girl was sitting cross-legged in the middle of the small clearing with her palms together. Naruto glanced at him. Hello Lord Jiraiya. He waved for the girl to keep meditating when her eyes opened. Naruto sat up on the branch and looked at the older man. To what do I owe this visit? Jiraiya crossed his arms. A better question is why are you training the Hyuga and the Kurama heiresses? Naruto shrugged in reply. I don't see how that is any of your concern. He didn't break under the pressure of the war veteran's stare, asking dismissively, why are you here again? I came to tell you that we have a mission, the man said. I remember quite vividly that the third Hokage disallowed me from joining the academy. I'm sure he told you that, the younger Seal Master said as he tossed a pair of earplugs to Yakumo Kurama when her eyes opened again, quietly eavesdropping on the two Seal Masters. Focus, Yakumo. The girl quietly nodded and plugged her ears before she went back to meditating. He had found the girl about to slip a kitchen knife through her throat in his special clearing. He had stopped her just in time with his snake rope. The reason behind her suicide attempt was that her mentor had blocked her from becoming a ninja, seeing as how she had a demon locked up inside her. She told him that since before she could walk her ambition had been to become a ninja, but after she had been found in a pool of her clan's main branch blood by her mentor, Kurenai he had sealed up her chakra, leaving only the barest minimum for her to live. The woman did so with a heavy heart, ready to bear the full brunt of the younger girl's hate instead of transferring her rage to Konoha. Her case reminded Naruto of himself, besides the suicide attempt. He had always wanted to be a ninja and had pushed Fuinjutsu to its limits to accomplish this, but the person he once looked up to barred him from becoming one, telling him that he was too weak. The boy had, begrudgingly, asked her if she wanted to come under his tutelage. He summoned Hinata and had her display the extent of growth she had gone under since she started training 2 months and a half ago. Thankfully she agreed. The Kurama heiress's physical and mental problems were worse than Hinata's, utterly laughable if Naruto was the kind to laugh at misfortune. She had also been a recluse in her clan, even though she was the Kurama heiress. Her confidence was worse than Hinata's, and, quite frankly, Naruto's toes were stronger than Yakumo's whole body, and that was saying something, since the boy didn't know any Taijutsu style. But Naruto wasn't one to back down from a challenge. He suspected that it was his Uzumaki genes working up. He first tore off the seal on her chakra and taught her how to meditate, making sure to oversee their sessions in case her inner demon managed to come out. The boy insisted on knowing what the demon could do before he could create an effective seal against it. His eyes refocused on the sand and then looked questionably for an answer to his question. When we found you, you were in the center of a sleeping sound shinobi, and all your guards were dead. Naruto shrugged, unmindful of the point Jiraiya was drawing towards and carefully observing Yakumo as she meditated. Information about your Jinchuriki status has leaked out of the village, and the council has decided that for your safety, it would be best if you had the strongest guard. The blonde boy raised an eyebrow. Wouldn't it be best if I was left alone? I did more by myself than my supposed guards, he air quoted, making the Sannin chuckle. The fact remains that I have to have you with me for as long as possible. Naruto looked the man in the eye for a full minute, making a cold sweat break out on his forehead. What else did the third Hokage request? The man's shoulders slumped tiredly, already giving up the charade. Did I teach you how to handle Kyuubi's chakra? I can learn that on my own. He turned around and looked at his youngest student. Have you unlocked it? His eyes widened in horror. Naruto made a flippant hand gesture at his side. More or less. And what does that mean? That means I have met the beast and we have reached an agreement, he said slowly like he was talking to a toddler. You met Kyuubi? Naruto rolled his eyes. Yes, and he is fairly pleasant, but that is beside the point. I wish to exercise my legs outside the village. What mission do we have? He air quoted again. Jiraiya chose to push the discussion on just how the boy had unlocked the Kyuubi's chakra for later. The third Hokage says that he wants us to go and retrieve Tsunade's Senju. The slug Sannin. Knowing Naruto, he won't get any sort of surprised response, and he was proven right when Naruto merely nodded. There are many injured ninjas as well as the fact he wants her to become the fifth Hokage. When do we leave? Tomorrow at noon. I'll be there. Can I assume I still won't be a ninja? I'm sorry kid, another flippant hand gesture and he stopped, changing the conversation. How long can you walk? About 5 hours. I can run for 4. Knowing a dismissal when he sees one, Jiraiya left the clearing to wherever he usually went for leisure. At the end of supervising Hinata's training, he gave her an A-rank water jutsu to perfect and tasked her to learn and master as many Hyuga Taijutsu attacks as possible. He handed over the shy, introverted Yakumo to the recovering, openly caring Hinata, tasking the older girl to look after the younger girl while he was away. Hinata was coming out of her shell, and Naruto wanted his first student's growing confidence and self-assuredness to rub off on Yakumo. He then gave Hinata a scroll filled with body lock seals, just in case Yakumo's inner demon showed up, as well as chakra-draining seals to knock the girl out. He told her that the first sign of trouble was if black veins began creeping up Yakumo's neck. Though Daku shadow clones were always secretly looking over the girl at night, Hinata, choosing to be the bigger girl, promised to look after her fellow student, adding that she would also look over the girl's training while he was away. Like during the Sand Sound invasion, Hinata was going to make her teacher proud. Leaving the village with a chatty Jiraiya, Naruto reflected on his skills. He was a level 9 master of Fuinjutsu, which meant that the simple barrier seals he made were practically impenetrable if the attacker had less chakra than him. He had his shield seal tattooed to the back of his forearms and his shins, with new seals he developed called tree root seals on his calf. Those seals reinforced his legs into the ground in case he had to block an attack from an opponent with a larger body mass. The tree root seals made chakra root stick Naruto's legs into the ground and increase his arm muscle strength significantly only for blocks. The shields on his forearms and shins doubled up as cutting weapons as well. He had a seal between his shoulders called Iron Blue Bubble Seal that activated automatically if it sensed an object or a person coming at him too quickly for him to raise his shields. The bubble shield was formed out of a combination of his wind and water chakra into multiple seal complexes stacked into a complex seal. This meant that the attacker or object bounced off the bubble on contact, or, if it was slow enough, the object would enter, but would seem like it was swimming in a pool of thick syrup. This was the seal that saved him when the One Tail threw him into a wall with a massive backhand swipe. He could personally activate the seals to cushion his falls if he wanted to. Gaara's automatic sand defense might have sparked an idea in Naruto's head, but the seal was years in the making. Seeing the automatic defense activate ahead of Rock Lee's strikes opened Naruto's mind to another angle in creating that seal. Truly, Naruto loved Fuinjutsu. Before he could get carried away and start fantasizing about his backlog of seal plans and ideas, Naruto shook his head and recalled that he needed to focus a part of his mind on walking. Still, to distract himself from the annoying prattle of the Toad Sage, his thoughts retook. Naruto, while he was at Wave, commissioned a local tailor to sew a set of his usual baggy black pants and a blue-black long-sleeved shirt, throwing in a blue scarf in case he ever wound up in a desert for some reason. The young tailor, greatly appreciative of his country being liberated and the economy being revived successfully, didn't question the fact that Daku, known as part of Wave's saviors, obeyed the beck and call of the young boy. Correctly assuming he was the real leader and addressing him as such. Naruto had already reconciled with himself that if information about his leadership status ever came out, he was confident that his seals would help him escape Konoha, and Zabuza, Haku and Daku would escort him to Wave. The blonde seal master was fairly good at throwing punches and kicks, but he didn't know any taijutsu style. But that fact didn't perturb him because his whole body and his clothes were riddled with so many secrets, counterattacks, defensive seals in case the frontline defense seals failed in booby traps. Just to be careful, he altered his X-contact seal and Daku's creation scroll so he would be able to send out a tingle to Daku if he was ever in trouble, and vice versa. The loyal Dark Shadow would follow this beacon to him with lightning-fast speed and come to his aid. Yes, Naruto didn't necessarily need a guard anymore, Daku included, seeing as he was currently in wave administering in his steed, but if Jiraiya wanted to humor himself, then he would allow the man to have his fun. Besides, he was getting to see other places out of all of this, which was fine by him. Unknown to the pair of travelers, a pair of yellow eyes watched them walk towards Tenzuki town. Zetsu looked fixedly at the younger traveler, Naruto. He had witnessed his fight with the One-Tails and was fairly certain that he could have taken the sand beast down sooner if he wanted to. The boy was much more skilled in his craft than he had anticipated, wrongly judging at first that he would drop Fuinjutsu after seeing how complicated it was. He would have to somehow convince Nagato to come after him early. But those parting thoughts, Black Zetsu melted into the ground. Root headquarters, Konoha, a female donning a featureless white mask, knelt in front of a man. The man wore a formal kimono that covered his whole left side and his feet, leaving his right arm, wrapped up in bandages, to hold his cane. Half of the man's face was wrapped in bandages as well. The female didn't quiver under Danzo's intense stare as she waited for permission to speak. "Mole, report," Danzo droned in a deep empty tone. Wave is a thriving country with an abundance of natural resources and a growing economy, which is still reviving from what Geto had done to it. The ninja there are of unbelievable strength, and the wall's defenses, as well as the defense on the water boundary, is almost impossible to bypass. That is why I am the only one to survive. There seemed to be a lightning field that sprang up around us after we touched the walls, and I jumped out in time. My comrades disintegrated before I could rescue them. I apologize for my failure, Lord Danzo. I will punish you later, Mole. What about the leadership there? Do you know who leads Wave? No, Lord Danzo. The people were very close-lipped about it, and the Wave Leader's tower was fortified with too many defense seals, ones I couldn't even find. I couldn't infiltrate there without dying. This mysterious leader that is reviving that cesspool is very good at what he does and already has strong ninjas under his command that is very questionable, he mumbled to himself. The probability of infiltrating again, tell me with all honesty, is it possible? Mole was silent for a few minutes. No, Lord Danzo. As I was leaving disguised as a worker, I saw someone looking over the seals behind the walls and a few other people entering the water, probably to check the seals there. I think they are improving the defense. Wave is too defensively strong to infiltrate, Danzo. The man refrained from glaring at her. How are you so prepared, Wave Leader? He swiveled around. Report to Fuyamanaka for your punishment. Dismissed. I shall have your remarkable strength, Wave. Not now though, I will prepare my men to take it from you and make it mine. For Konoha. Mole silently stood up and marched down the semi-dark tunnels of Root headquarters. Her mind was in a blaze. Naruto personally set this mission to her, seeing how she had sworn her loyalty to him, as well as the three others. She was the most skilled out of the three reformed Root ninjas, which meant that the probability for her to survive his defenses and his trackers was higher than the rest, so Danzo would believe she survived. To prove her loyalty to Naruto, she willingly asks to be put under a loyalty seal. The difference with the one she had under Danzo was that she wasn't in her right senses, doing things blindly for the Warhawk, but since she had willingly asked for a loyalty seal from Naruto, she knew what she was doing. The boy had put a mind block seal in her in case Yamanaka was ever to search her memories, sifting through the false ones instead of the real ones. That seal was still very experimental, seeing as there weren't any Yamanaka available to test the seal on. The boy had assured her that the seal would at least make it very difficult for her thoughts to be read or her actions to be influenced. Mole didn't think she would ever look up to anyone younger than herself, but Naruto had broken that thought process down with his show of Fuinjutsu mastery and his command over the single strongest creature in the nation, Daku, who was much stronger than anything she had ever seen in her 19 years of living and her 14 years of serving in Root. The boy, as a reward for her loyalty, sealed off her pain nerve endings, giving her the key to switch it back on if she ever wanted. This meant that she would never feel pain ever again unless she wanted to, something she would forever be grateful to Master Naruto for doing. The young Fuinjutsu genius had promised to liberate her from Root if he had gotten all the information he needed.